Hi, Zizaran here. New podcast just dropped. It's Rise QTZD Noogie, joined by Rory and Jonathan, game designer and game director of Transfigured Games. And I'm going to react to it. It is very long, so I'm still going to play the game at the same time while reacting. And I'll pause the podcast underway and talk about it. Obviously, I am preparing for my own podcast with Jonathan as well. It's going to be me and Jonathan and Hrishi, I believe. Not 100% confirmed on Hrishi yet. But he does like items and stuff for grinding games, and that's gonna be 28th of January. I'm not sure when my podcast is gonna be. Here, I have a countdown to it. 17 days, 7 hours from now. 30th of January, 9:30 Auckland time. Anyway, I'll announce that on Twitter at some point. But anyway, yeah, this is just gonna be me reacting and talking about this. So that is what we're gonna do today.
Welcome back, Exiles. We are joined by
Hi,
Rise
Ziggy.
QT and Nugian to chat to developers.
I'm
Rory
here too.
And Jonathan from Grinding Gear Games today.
You
Thanks for
forgot
joining
about
us
me.
once again, folks.
No problem.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Very
Thanks,
excited
Ziggy.
to see you guys doing so much kind of pre-PoE 2 beta discussions with everyone here. Answering so many questions. I've been hearing like a lot of stuff I'm really excited about too, like quality of life and visual improvements and access to content and things. So it's good. It's good.
Awesome.
So we have a lot of interesting questions today, and we're going to jump straight into them if that's all right with you fine folks.
Right.
And I've been curious about, so it was originally announced that the Path of Exile 1 and 2 endgames would be combined and would be a joined thing. Now that we've had the announcement that the two games are separate, what is exactly the plan for Endgame now?
So we aren't yet announcing the full plan, but we have got a design. The overall kind of like, I guess like approach is very similar to what we're doing now, as far as like it's going to have maps in it, right? Like that's the main thing.
Right.
But like the specifics, I want to be quite different. Like I want it to feel quite different than how it felt before. Like so that we can do something that feels like it's an evolution. So yeah, we're
Different bad. I don't like changing my life, chat. I don't like changing my life. I like things to stay the same. That's why PoE is a very comforting game. Because it's a new circle mechanic every league, and I'm okay with circles. I've grown accustomed to circles. I don't like change. Change is bad. I'm scared.
We've got a plan for it. The end game is going to be in the beta, so you will get to experience
Okay.
that. We'll sort of announce it a little bit closer to when the beta's happening. But I guess like
Yeah, like what if we got triangles?
a lot of questions people have about like how much access to content will there be as far as like number of things to a map and all these kind of things. Like those are questions that we'll be announcing a little bit closer. But if you have any sort of more specific concerns about it, I'm happy to address them.
So they're not going to be a combined endgame at all now anymore? Like that?
Oh no, they're not. They're going to be separate. And I think that now that they're separate games, it just it just makes sense for them to be separate. And like all the bosses from campaign of PoE 2 will come in the end game in the end game as well, and that kind of stuff. So it'll just end up being quite different.
Yeah, so obviously like a whole bunch of different map bosses and things like that. But will we see a big divergence in like the structure of them? How we have like atlas passive trees and things like that?
Well, I mean, sort of hard to sort of tread the line here of what to say about this, because yes, there are changes, but as I said, I think it will feel quite different while mechanically not removing anything that can currently be done, if you know what I mean. That's kind of at least what I'm trying to go for, if that's like enough of a hint, I guess, for you.
Yeah.
Which I guess is what we've got here.
No, I get it, but I have to say I'm just like in love with the current endgame state of Path of Exile 1, so looking forward to seeing how you build.
I'll tell you what, the thing that people do love about it is the fact that there are lots of different things you can do, and there's also the ability to choose what it is that you what it is that
I was about to say that last thing is like the most important. That's what made me love PoE and fall in love with PoE again, has been our the player agency and how much they've focused on player agency. Oh, and I probably should have prefaced this in the video, but I do have a cold at the moment, so I'm a bit sick, so sorry about that. But I love how much like we have so much choice, and we get to like choose exactly what we want to do. You can just skip things you don't want to do, or like cut it out, I guess, entirely if you're a crazy person. But yeah, I don't know. We have so much player agency. I've never seen so much player agency in a game, actually. And I think that's like the main reason why I like love the PoE recently. Because like most games get pretty stale past 20,000 hours, but I'm still like really excited and still play PoE off stream, which is kind of crazy. Like I think a lot of, especially streamers that once they're like over 20,000 hours in a game, it becomes like a work only thing, and like when they're done streaming, they want anything else to do. And obviously, like I'm only playing like 800 hours a league now instead of 1,200 hours a league, but I still literally look forward to every league start, which is like a testament to like how amazing PoE is. And I think a lot of that is like them making, even though I said change is bad, yeah, the making changes like that where they like give us a lot more player agency.
That you want to do, and I think those are the philosophies that we want to make sure that we're retaining as much as possible, and even
That's good.
amplifying in the base system. Like I want to make sure that like that feeling of like, yeah, I can choose what type of content I'm doing is definitely a core part of what we're designing there.
All right, wonderful. Rise, can you take us away for the next question, mate?
Sure, I'll just read it off. Do you plan to change the high-end power level in PoE 2? Will you still be able to one-shot entire maps and Ubers, or do you want to scale everything back? GGG has been quite vague in answering this in the past, leaving many players confused about the direction of PoE 2's gameplay compared to PoE 1.
I mean, yeah, we never designed the PoE 1 Uber bosses to be one shot. That's not part of the core philosophy. Is how does this fight feel when it ends in half a second? But,
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I hate it. Like, I don't mind if like a few people are able to make some sort of softcore glass cannon that one shots an Uber, but I don't like it when one shotting bosses is even possible. To be honest, like ideally not for anyone. I don't know how to fix this problem, but I hate it. I hate it when I see like the cast on death meta and stuff. Whenever somebody like completely bypasses every stage of the fight, like what's the point in bosses? Like obviously like it will always be different on hardcore, so it doesn't affect me as much, thankfully. But you can do it on hardcore now as well, which sort of I kind of hate that. Like you should have to do mechanics. I think that's, and like it's great if you like that. Like obviously people like different things. That's really, really important. Like all I can share is my opinion and my take on things. Like somebody else would be like, man, I fucking love one-shotting bosses. I don't think anything in the game should be a challenge. I just want to spawn loot and pick it up. Or maybe you feel like the challenge itself is getting a gear or a character that can do that, and that's fine. But like, I personally hate it. I'm like, oh my god. Literally the worst thing in a game ever is when you can just like do something without any challenge. On shotting long in, yeah, I mean we're allowed to like different things. I get that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan. Personally.
there's definitely when we are looking towards all these bosses, even the campaign bosses, it's making sure that the challenge is intense for where you're planned to be and what your power level is and so on. And that does mean for many boss fights, when they're really epic, they're gonna last, and the boss is gonna push everything it can at you to try and take you on, and it's a challenge to beat it. And it's natural for characters' power to grow, especially as they outgrow the content. So we can expect, because we give the players huge numbers of tools, they will find ways to use and abuse them to do crazy things. That's just part of the game, and as players raise the bar, we'll raise the bar for challenge as well.
I do think they're probably okay out of any game I play. They're the best developers at letting emergent gameplay happen. So like things that weren't necessarily even intended by them. Like, oh wow, this is a fucking crazy interaction. Like I think like PoE is the best game for emergent gameplay, where there's like, well, this was clearly not intended, and then the games are like, you know what, it wasn't intended, but it's really fucking cool, we're gonna keep it. Like, for those that don't know, Righteous Fire was never intended to be a standalone skill when it was made. From what I understand, Righteous Fire was meant to buff other skills like Freezing Pulse and stuff. So I think they're really cool with things like that. And obviously there are probably other games that do that too, but I think PoE is like pretty much the best.
I think people underestimate the degree to which like people learning the game has changed the ability for people to be good at the game. Like when PoE 2 comes out, there might be ways that in there to be able to do that stuff that we don't know about, but like that's just by the nature of the fact that we tend to be very kind of like we give people a lot of tools, right? We give them also, and they're able to combine them in interesting ways. But like what I expect to happen is that at the start people won't be able to do that level of power just because they haven't worked out the builds yet, if you know what I mean. Like, and so and as that kind of like as that stuff is worked out over time.
That's something we're really bad at as a community. Like, people throw the pram really quick in PoE. Like, I think we're, like, as a community, extremely impatient with things being at the power level that we've come to expect. Like, I feel like every time something gets nerfed, people are like, it's fucking ruined, it's fucking dead. Like, even, like, as far back as the Valspark days, I remember, like, they nerfed Valspark, and they even put in the patch notes in every single way, and everyone was, like, tagging me on Reddit. And then, like, less than a week later, I was Valsparking, and Valspark budget went from, like, 10C to, like, 3 or 4 Exalted Orbs to play it. And it's, like, people are always, like, if something isn't a certain way, they're like, oh, it's dead. It's, like, dead in the water. Awful skill now. So it's, like, I think we're pretty bad at that as a community. We need to get a bit better at, like, finding things out, which is what we're kind of all about as a game, really. But, like, we throw the pram a bit quickly.
That stuff will then come. It's sort of, like, interesting. I've actually had a conversation with Mark quite a few times recently about, like, well, why... It felt like a few years ago, this sort of exponentialness of PoE kind of, like, exploded a bit. And we kind of had a lot of discussions about, like, why is that the case? Like, what sort of happened? And it's kind of a combination of different factors, I think, that happened, which I guess is a bit of a non-answer. But like some of it really is just people learning to understand, like, optimizing, understanding how all of that stuff works to a degree that they can now do the kind of things that they can do, as well as us just adding stuff. Like, it isn't entirely just power creep on our end; it's power creep on the players learning the game better too. So yeah, it's just.
That's actually so fucking true as well. Not just in, like, PoE, but every game. Like, we as a species have evolved so much gaming wise. Cause, like, think about Molten Core in World of Warcraft, right? Like, how many people in chat played Molten Core when it came out, right? And that was fairly challenging when it came out. Like, not like super hard. But that would be, like, even for most people now, be considered absolutely trivial, right? Absolutely trivial. And yeah, obviously a big part of Molten Core and what made that hard was coordinating 40 people that, you know, barely managed to open doors to begin with and actually make them do mechanics. But we are so much better at gaming now, like, in every game. So, like, I think even... Like, I would classify myself as an early adopter in games. Like, I play so many different games, right? So when a game comes out, I learn it really, really fast because I've played so many games throughout my life. So that when something like Apex or Fortnite comes out, I'm really good in the start and I learn really fast. And then when people start min-maxing, I'm like, oh my god, I feel washed up. And there's probably some people in chat that feel like that too. Like, they'll, like, learn fast, but they won't like stay on top of the metas and stay on top of, like, the min-maxing. But I think that is also getting harder and harder because, like, just gamers in general are getting, like, so incredibly good that, like, it kind of, like, the min-maxers take over faster. So, like, I love games early. That's my favorite time to play them. Like, Ark, Fortnite, Spellblade? What was that, like, cool spell battle royale called? I can't remember. But yeah. All of those, it's like, I love the early stage. That's my favorite part. I don't love when a game is being, like, super min-maxed. Then I start getting a bit bored. Also, is there a reason to do this at tier 16s or do you just do it at tier 1s? Is this just like the harvest one? There's no reason to do this in high maps, no? Can't think of any, at least. Let's go do it on Penis Brand.
I suspect that things will get a bit of a reset just from the fact that all the mechanics are so different, all the skills and all that things work so differently. Or, you know, maybe someone will find something totally broken in the first day. I don't know. But my hope is that it will take a little while before the really interesting strategies kind of come together.
It's fair.
I feel like recent innovations in Path of Building alone have made my builds like 50% stronger.
True. Literally, like the tools we have available now. The tools, even like honestly, everything just adds up so much. Like the tools we have available now is so big. It really is.
It's very possible. It's very possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
Alright.
mean, the other interesting thing is how fast in PoE 2 do those kinds of tools.
And how much we communicate. I think so. This is a really fascinating anecdote, but at one point, the Garena realm, the China realm, invited all the Western racers to race. And even though a lot of the Asian racers, like the Chinese racers, had been racing a lot and playing a lot on the Western realm, I talked to one of the racers, and he said that the Chinese mentality for racing was very different than the Western one. And he noticed that the Western players were all sharing strats. They might keep one strat secret for the race, but a lot of them would help each other practice. Like Tai would maybe be practicing with Exile, or Exile would be practicing with Ben, and they'll be helping each other improving. Whereas a lot of the Chinese racers were like sort of like sticking like close together, or like sticking to themselves and not sharing strats. So when we were like racing against them, they got absolutely dunked on. So just the fact that like as a community, we're really, really good at sharing strategies and helping each other improve. So we're like super plateauing in skill level at a higher level. Really, it's really interesting. I think that is something we're pretty good at as a community, is like sharing. Like we're even people who aren't streamers, like you very rarely see people like keep things secret. There will be some of that on like the softcore economy and like mirror stuff. Like obviously I remember I've had incidents with that where like people have like yelled at me for like letting people mirror things too cheap. But outside of economy,
Become as good. I mean, I imagine it will be faster, right? Just because,
Yeah,
like, you know,
it's already
the
been
underlying
done.
stuff is there. Yeah, sure, to some extent. Although there's mechanically a lot of things are changing under the hood, right? Like just like base things that you've been able to rely on a lot, you know, in terms of like just the base equations for how defenses work and things like that change a bit, and then that has large knock-on effects to the game. So, you know, like people will have to work out like what the repercussions of all that is again, I think. But I mean, at the same time, like I imagine the tools will be made quite quickly.
I imagine you're quite excited for that reset, right? Like, I
Oh,
am.
absolutely! It's huge. Like it's absolutely great to be able to just be like, okay, nothing is off the table for changes now. You know, like we are able to do whatever we think might need to be changed. We are able to look at it again. It's great.
And every time we change one of those mechanics, it results in 10 other systems having to be rethought. And then those 10 systems require 10 systems each to be rethought. So it changes a lot.
Like, I mean, we have definitely not fully explored the repercussions ourselves of all of the stuff that we've changed, for sure, right? Like, there will have to be a lot of more work in that stuff, I have no doubt.
It's kind of our job as well.
Absolutely.
Nuki, could you take the next question, mate?
Sure. In the previous interview, you spoke about a difference in drops between, let's say, a novice and a very experienced player, being in like a factor of even thousands, say.
1,000.
Yeah. But with PoE 2, at least from what I can see, you tend to show that there is a bit of a flatter curve, if that makes sense, in terms of power gain.
I think.
So do you just to like finish, do you intend to force like the like this difference through other means, or will it be something that we will get later on, and maybe the gap will be like, let's say, smaller in the beginning because there is less potential for power?
Well, okay, so first of all, I wouldn't... The word force there, I think, kind of doesn't quite exactly...
Right.
Like, it's not like we're forcing this to happen. What I would say is that you have to have the ability to make your character better to a large degree. Otherwise, what do you even have, right? Like, if the
Yes.
difference between a good player and a bad player is 10x, like, well, I mean, I don't think you've got enough of a game there. Like that. And the funny thing is 10x may even sound like a good thing if you're like to someone who isn't really kind of, I guess, being around the block with this stuff. Like, it may feel like kind of, oh yeah, like a good player is 10 times faster. But the thing is that there's so many things that factor on top of it. Like,
Yeah.
you can have a 10 times difference in clear speed as just one element, and then you can have a 10 times difference in damage as well. And once you've got a 10 times difference in damage, that means that you can have like the person can do harder content, and of course, if they are going to multiply the content difficulty that they're going to be able to do in some way by 10x, they expect 10x rewards, or maybe they don't expect 10x, but they expect certainly a bump in rewards that is commensurate with the difficulty increase, right?
Yeah.
And then
even just having done a map many times, you know the layout.
It's also like you're never going to. I don't even think casual players want this or think this, but you're never going to be able to like narrow the gap between no-lifers and casual players, right? Because like, it's just like, it's not even about the hours we play, it's the hours and efficiency. It's the same like when I'm new at a game and stuff, I'm playing it so differently. Like I remember being new at Tarkov, for example, and you're thinking about what you're doing. It's just how the world works, right? Like that's sort of like a you can never force that gap if you have an actual game. Why else would people strive to get better? Yeah, exactly. 100%. 100%. It's not really something that's fixable or should be fixed. I could listen to Jonathan talk about game design all day. Yeah. We're very lucky that every dev I've seen has been very like well spoken, and I like there's not really an expectancy of you to be well spoken as a developer, right? Like they're very good. I think we're quite lucky with that, because like there's I know like probably a lot of people wouldn't be like super comfortable. Every dev studio is actually passionate and excited about the game even after 10 years. Yeah. I mean, they've done something really special. It is very, very special. Takes a certain skill to be buzzed for this long. Yeah, 100%. Use the sextant. Oh, so this is a memory. This is a memory. You can't use sextants on this.
Out, you know,
Right,
which
right.
encounters you can rush it and
Yes.
which ones
Right,
you can
right.
hold
There's
back.
definitely things-
And that's another 10 times on
Right,
top
right.
of those other things, so you quickly multiply to that 1,000.
Absolutely, like getting to 1,000 is honestly like the challenge is not so much getting to 1,000. The challenge is not getting above 1,000. That is like the that is the hard part. And like PoE 1 is absolutely in the 100,000 times territory, I believe, right now. We're kind of looking at where we're kind of at as far as like where that is. And so that this is a scaling back. And I think that.
And speaking of that, that's actually like so power. Like MMOs are so lucky. MMOs are so lucky because MMOs don't have any power creep. Like they do, but like World of Warcraft and stuff gets to do a full reset, a full wipe, and like they do like the numbers go up and stuff, but it realistically is a full wipe. Everything stays around the same difficulty all the time, whereas for an ARPG is so much harder. You know, because like, and the best thing is you're actually convinced as a player that MMOs never, like there's probably a lot of people in chat that play MMOs like World of Warcraft, right? And it doesn't feel like it wipes, but it does. It is a full wipe, right? You lose everything. When a new expansion comes out, you lose everything, but it doesn't feel like it. So it's a really good, it's a really cool thing. WoW even calls it seasons. Yeah. Kind of wrong here. Oh, really? Okay, that's cool. People hate it. Really? PoE has a full wipe. Most MMOs do not. No. When a new expansion comes out, all the gear you have is irrelevant. Like, if you have the like endgame rating gear, generally like 3 levels into the next level, your questing gear is better. You don't lose everything. Well, you do because it's irrelevant. It just sits in your bank. So you do lose everything. But you practically, functionally, you functionally lose everything. Which is good. Like, you have to have that in a game, right? Like, stuff like that is so important. And even things like gold, right? Usually, like, I remember, like, what was the multiplier going from vanilla to TBC? Like, it was like, I feel like it was 10 times. Like, if you had 1,000 gold in vanilla, you would need 10,000 in TBC. It's basically a 10x. So, like, you know, you still have stuff, but gold is 4 times each add-on. I feel like it was 10. Horizontal progression and vertical progression. Yeah, it's so hard. It's so difficult in PoE. And PoE has such a unique problem here because they don't add new stuff like endgame bosses at a fast enough pace to keep up with the power creep. And in PoE, it's about how you feel. Like, you get used to, as a player, killing, like, even essences. Like, if you won League, we're killing essences in 30 seconds, but in the next league, you're killing essence monsters in 2 minutes. You're going to be like, man, I'm doing something wrong, and you're going to feel bad. So it's such a hard problem for PoE to face. So, like, I am still in the camp of, like, I'm worried PoE 2 is not going to be for me, and I'm worried it's going to be too slow. But at the same time, I really hope we don't start anywhere near the PoE 1 power level. I understand those are two very opposing takes, but I really do hope there is a big power creep scale back so that we have something to grow on again. And I just want to hope that I'm able to see and treat PoE as a new game. Wait, this is already corrupted. Because, like, we can't start where we're at now. Because I don't think PoE 1 doesn't really have much further to go. And I think we're again at a point where PoE 1 does need a power creep scale back. Because what feels the best is getting more powerful each season. Well, actually, it doesn't need a power creep scale back. It needs, like, new bosses, I guess. New bosses. Because things like 3.15 does feel quite bad. But, like, it's like, where do we go from here, right? Like, where do we go from here? You want to one-shot 2 bosses? You know, like, there's not that much to go. And we don't really have limitless, like, that much limitless content like Delve. So, yeah, tier 20 maps, like, tier 19 maps actually added a lot. But that's, like, not as available to me. Destructive play and imitations? Yeah. Well, I mean, destructive play isn't hard, though. You don't need a lot of power creep for destructive play. But that type of stuff, yeah. Even Delve is hitting its limits. Yeah, we're very power creeped right now. I don't envy them. I don't envy them because it's such a hard problem. And I know a lot of developers have said players are good at identifying problems, not solutions. But I, like, especially feel like that here because I don't know how to solve it. Because I know that losing that power creep, it actually does feel terrible. It actively feels bad. So I don't know what they do here. PoE 2 is the solution, really, because hopefully you're able to, like, think enough that that's a different enough game. Because it is so hard. It is very difficult. What's hard about it is fighting through all the player whining. Yeah, but, like, it's not even just about the whining, though. We want to feel good. It is quite difficult. It is quite difficult. When people are mad at Arch Nemesis, I mean, a lot of things with Arch Nemesis was valid criticism, though. But, like, I loved Arch Nemesis. I loved it when it was a league. Because then we had a lot of autonomy and picking and choosing. Oh, that's nice.
Right.
People maybe hear 1,000 times and think that, like, yeah, like I think they get the wrong idea about that. So, like, that's going to change things. I think one of the other things I've seen on Reddit and so on as well recently is, like, the concern about, like, does this mean I'm going to have to be using Magic Find gear and stuff like that? And I guess I did want to talk about that as well, because that is something that people have been worried about, I guess. And I actually had another conversation with Chris about this because I needed to kind of refresh my memory of, like, so I literally said to Chris, like, Chris, I want you to pitch me from scratch again on why Magic Find gear is good. And
yeah, please, I want to hear this.
Like, I need a refresher course on this again. And
so I'm in Jonathan's camp here because I don't like Magic Find gear personally. It's interesting because it was one of my favorite things in D2, but I think it's very destructive to the rest of the game. I feel like I love. It's very weird because I love doing it, but every time Magic Find is in the gear, I get the feeling of like, well, why would I do anything else? So I think it ends up detracting a lot on the rest of the game for me. And I felt like that's so many patches. Like, do you remember when Biscos, the amulet, was super OP? I ended up like the entire league feeling like my amulet slot was locked, and that unless I was doing bosses, I was stupid for not wearing a Biscos. And I don't want to feel like that. Like, I don't want to feel like that. In D2, you didn't lose power with Magic Find. It was a plus stat. That's not true. You definitely did. You definitely did. I did, at least on my sort. Whenever I'm playing Path of Diablo, I definitely lose a lot by being Magic Find.
Really comes down to, like, you need your game to have some axis of scaling that isn't just DPS. Like like having some other element, it just means that there's another factor to consider in your character build. And I guess that that's a thing that we do believe in, that it is important, which isn't to say like, but it needs to be competitive, right? It cannot be the case that Magic Find should outcompete damage. Like there needs to be some balance there, but it's another thing to optimize for. At the point when you have gotten your DPS to the point where you can take down anything, having the ability to, okay, now I want to be able to do that at the same time as also having MF gear is like something that can add to that. So I think that's kind of the reason why it is important. If you don't have that, then like, I mean, it's similar to the balance between damage and defenses, right? Like it's just there's like a kind of triangle of factors you have to consider in your build. So it's just something to consider.
Why do you think
that's kind of the thing?
Why do you think Magic Find gear is unpopular amongst like at least a vocal minority in the community then?
I guess, that's an interesting question. I think it's a little bit to do with go on.
I think part of the reason is that the way it scales at the moment in PoE1 is quite exponential. So a lot of Magic Find gear is a lot better than a little bit and a lot of damage. So the scaling we definitely want to make sure that doing low tier content with very high rarity gear is not better than doing high tier content with a bit of rarity gear.
Right. Yes, that is a very important factor. Actually, yes, that's important. Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yep.
Do you have anything in mind how to do that?
Honestly, so this particular area, like we will have to go and revisit those equations and do stuff, but I have to say it's not something we've yet done the balance for.
Right.
I actually then also because there are all sorts of things deep in the dark recesses of the drop code that that exist that all have to be looked at again. The equation for the way that Magic Find gear has diminishing returns is weird and nobody understands it. And there's stuff going on there that I kind of need.
Do you know what's really, really funny is when asked at a podcast if there was so there are hidden recipes in PoE, right? Lore weave and stuff like that. And when asked, I think it was me that asked it at a podcast. I can't remember, but we asked if all recipes have been discovered. They said we don't know anymore. We don't remember. We think we forgot one. So there might actually be a recipe in PoE that they don't remember if the community knows anymore. So they were a little unsure. They were a little unsure if there was still wouldn't that be data mined though? The recipes aren't data mined. You can't data mine those. They're server side. So they were a little unsure if we discovered everything, and they weren't sure if they remembered what we didn't know. So that was a little fascinating. That was a little fascinating.
Need to really go back and dive into and have another have a look at. And I'm sure Rishi will there'll be long conversations with Rishi about exactly all the stuff that needs to happen here. But I need to actually honestly re-understand some of the reasons why some of that stuff exists in the first place again myself to really get it. But yeah, Rory is completely correct that the main thing that has to be the case is it can't be better to do lower tier content with MF gear than it is to do higher tier content without it. That is I think a very good guiding philosophy to make sure that it's right.
That moment is kind of why I love these Q&As. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It also feels like it cheapens a little bit of the rest of the game, right? If you have all these cool bosses and you designed all this great end game, and a month ago people started meffing in like tier 7 maps, and you would
So
think that they
I
would
don't
use
like.
all that currency
Yes,
to
I
move
absolutely
on.
do
But
not like that. That is a mistake in how that was. That shouldn't be like that. So yeah,
Nice.
you're correct about that.
All right, awesome. I love it. So my next question, then changing topics a little bit, is about that weapon and passive tree swapping system that was previewed. So you get the ability to bind certain skills to certain weapons, and then even different passive trees to different weapons. What happens then if you do something like, say, you ignite an enemy with a tree and a weapon that's built for big ignite damage, and then you swap over to something that doesn't have that? Is the damage that you have scaled dynamically? Do you stop dealing that damage? So on, things like that?
So the only thing that doesn't snapshot, the thing that updates is your permanent effects. So if you swap, your auras will change effect. You can't turn on an aura in an aura spec and switch to a non-aura spec.
Right.
Same for minions. You can't turn on your permanent minions in
Okay.
one spec and then expect them to be as powerful as then your second set, which is just about having maximum spirit.
Which I believe I
Versus-
might have incorrectly understood in previously. I'm not 100% sure I got that exactly right, because yeah, like in general, when you've got two weapon sets, you have two versions of the skill, but but for permanent effects, like things that are considered permanent, like minions, it does update when you change spec. But it's not only for permanent minions. Like a temporary minion will not change, because a temporary minion, well, being temporary means that you don't. So there's like a little tricky detail here, but effectively, while you have a weapon swap, you have two versions of every skill on your character, and when like both of them exist at the same time, so they sort of independently can have their own balance. And like if you fire a fireball and then change over to another one, like that fireball still is the fireball you cast from your other weapon set, so it gets all the bonuses that other weapon set conveyed.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
if you have your totem bound to your first weapon set and you place that totem down, then switch to your second weapon set, it's still using the first weapon set's totem with all of its stats and benefits and things like
Yeah.
that.
Cool.
So there is a lot of like, yeah, you can have a curse
Damn.
set up as your second spec.
Huh.
You've got enough, the right sort of passive layout to make the alt passives fit with it. So you can have like big curses in one set and then
Yeah.
take the time to weapon swap and then start
Yeah.
doing your thing. if
Yeah,
you
so
want.
we're getting like the full power of both, basically. And so like I could do a big
I could see a lot of problems with that. Like, obviously, like, you never know until you try it, but like, that could be really fucking tedious too. That could be really fucking tedious too. Like, I'm the type of player that if you can min-max something like that, you should. So like, I don't know. I'm curious how that'll feel. Yeah. The tree auto swaps. The tree auto swaps, but you'd have to like, it'll be like weapon swapping. It'll be one button. But you can do that in PoE. Right now, with like, there are some builds that like you can auto swap or weapon swap for a boss or something. Still can be tedious. Same with like switching out a gem. Like I'm not a big fan of that either, even though it's like one click. So it'll be interesting. I'm curious how it's gonna feel. Very curious.
big ignite on an enemy and then swap to a second setup that has an
Correct.
extra curse and then curse the enemy
Correct.
to scale that.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, true.
There's
The
also a
weapon
big
swaps are
focus on
automatic.
Making sure that like if you decide that you want
You're
cold
right,
in
you're
one
right.
and fire
I
in
forgot
other,
about the weapon swaps being
rewards should
automatic
be significant
when you
for
cast
that
the
to
skill.
go
Yeah.
along with the fact that you could have
Yeah,
had
that is
curse as
crazy.
your second
I forgot about that.
set.
Right.
That just seems
I
unreal.
guess you have like it's actually a different type of balance that we had to do before because like there's a thing where we like as Rory was just saying we have to make sure that like now we have to consider like what could your other weapon set be and make sure that the other
I'm glad both versions exist. Shitting on either one is cringe. I think it's less about shitting and more people are worried. Like people that really love PoE 1 right now are worried that PoE 2 isn't going to be for them, and they're worried that PoE 1 won't stick around forever, even though it's sticking around initially. So it's more fair than anything. I don't think it's so much about shitting on PoE 2.
those are like balanced with respect to each other because like we wouldn't want it to be the case that like everyone just has an alternate like like weapon set with curses.
Yeah, sorry.
Because, you know, like it has to be that there's something like there's competitive options no matter what it is you choose to have as your alternate, even though there can be quite a different build.
Yeah, same goes for weapons. Like if you're about applying stuns with maces in one set, then using swapping to your weapon set for your second thing needs to be able to take advantage of those stuns in a significant way to make it rewarding to be using 2 different weapon types rather than just having 2 different, slightly different flavored maces.
For sure.
Oh, that's way better than I expected. That's really awesome to hear. Sick.
Sounds like a balancing nightmare, though.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Then, that's pretty much our life at this point. So you know, like
Nice.
we would just why not make it, you know, 3 or 4 times harder to balance with every decision? Just whatever, you know, we'll just do it.
Why not, right?
Deal with it.
More things to nerf. Let's go.
Yeah. Sure. That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
Rise has a question about spirit. Take us away, Rise.
Wait, do I? Okay.
you do.
Can you talk more about Spirit and why you're moving away from mana reservation? Can you reserve HP with it?
Really, the reason to move to Spirit is so that mana can matter more. It's about making mana cost the thing that more builds can care about and less of a afterthought or something that we balance around being something you can ignore.
Yeah, I mean, the original conversation literally was, what are we going to do to make mana actually matter? And then it's like, well, what's the big problem with mana? Oh, it's the reservation system. Let's see what we can do about that. And then everything, like it was one of those really nice design moments when, you know, and it's actually interesting because I believe, Rory, you'd actually come up with this.
Not a single video game has gotten mana right. That's my hot take of the century. Not one game has made mana feel good. Not a single one. Never, ever in a video game has mana been done right. I have never, ever in a video game felt like, yeah, this game does mana well. The only game that did mana well was fucking like 2.9 or something in PoE, where Spellslinger was just added and Spellslinger didn't cost any mana. And it was basically, I think, early on, and you had like 13 different solutions to fix mana. Then mana was done well in PoE. Like, Spellslinger was kind of perfect because it came at the cost of damage, and that seemed fair. It was like, yeah, you can use Spellslinger as a clear ability, but it'll come at the cost of damage. You'll need to scale that much harder. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay with that. But I don't think mana is done well in any game right now. That's the thing. GDD doesn't want you to fix mana. Okay, but I, as the player, I want things to feel good. I want things to feel good in games. I want to feel good. That's very important for me in games. And no ARPG has made me feel good about mana. I think Last Epoch has an interesting system with the... Actually, I'm surprised no other game has done that. For those that aren't familiar with Last Epoch, it has a very interesting feature of their mana. If you have... Let's say you have a spell in Last Epoch that costs 160 mana, and you have 3 mana left. You can cast it once, and you have minus 157 mana. It's really smart and really fucking clever, but like then you are minus 150 and you have to like recover, but you get to cast it one time past your 0. Yeah, you loan mana debt. I think that's really good. I think that's going to be part of the solution to solving mana in a game. I don't think any game has done it right. I don't think any game has done it right. I think... Here's my hot take. I'm going to tell this to Last Epoch because they might actually do it. Here's my take on what would make mana feel good for me. I think you should have mana depth, and the more mana depth you're in, the less damage your ability does. I think that's the solution. I think that would make me feel very good, actually. So if you are like X% mana depth, it'll do 20% damage. So it'll keep doing damage, and your ability will work, but it'll do a lot less damage. I think that's a really good idea. I like that a lot. I'm going to bring that up with the devs. So you can keep casting even while in depth? Yeah, you can keep casting while in depth, and the further in depth you go, the less damage you do. Till eventually you have like 90% less damage. I think that's a really smart... and then you could even make builds around that. You can have mana depth builds. It opens up a new archetype. I like that. I want to see what they think of that. Because I do talk to the Last Epoch devs. Wow! Wow! Wowie! Wow, that's amazing for my penis brand. Wow. It's 11% more damage. Thank you. I'm now 38 million damage. Excellent. Yeah, no, like, that's cool. I like that. Minus 5k mana depth. Now you have to wait 20 minutes or relog. No, because you can just have a reset when he goes to town. But you could also then add a different mechanic, right? Clear your mana depth and deal X damage based on your mana depth. There's so many cool things you can do around that. Oh, I really like the mana depth idea. I'm gonna write that down. Right.
The system before.
I'd
Like-
like a couple of times for
Yeah, yeah. But then we sort of independently rediscovered it again, and then Rory was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. That's that same system I already came up with before now." And then when we started looking into that, it's like, okay, this actually solves like huge amounts of other problems. Like it became a thing. It's one of those awesome design moments where something happens, and then you're like, "Oh, this fixes like these problems as well, and these problems," and it turned into like a whole awesome thing. So
Already
we're
done it.
really happy with that.
I mean, specifically when you're talking about reserving life, we're probably going to have a support gem that lowers the spirit cost of something slightly, but makes it reserve some life as well. So you've got that sort of things you can do with it, and we're going to have to come up with a bunch of cool supports
Right.
that let you interact with spirit costs and spirit mechanics in ways that feel
There's something
impactful.
there's something technically preventing reservation being a thing. We just have to be really like of life and mana, that is, but we just have to be really careful that we don't accidentally make it again so that the most useful thing to do is that again, if you know what I mean. Like, we want to make sure that you never get back into a position where everyone is reserving all their resources. Like, it has to be that, like, that is not the default thing. Like, that is a niche thing to do, because the normal thing to do is use your spirit bar. So that's just important. But there's nothing, like, we may revisit things. I mean, like, you can.
That's
The
fair.
mechanic is there for use on things like uniques or maybe support gems in some cases, or just certain other things. We just need to be careful with it.
That's
Alright.
fair.
You can
Go
get
ahead.
it's like flat amounts of spirits, the spirit that you can get from quests and even killing
Yes, there
bosses,
is
right?
other sources, so it's on the tree as well. And yep, there's a couple of quests that give you a little bit, and
Amulet, I saw.
and yeah, and then things. Yes, amulet, exactly. There was things like that. So there's places you can get it, and of course the big one being the scepter for the kind of minion focused build is what you'll typically be wanting to use.
Yugi has a question about defenses next. Thanks, Wayne Yugi.
Of course I do.
Gotta build them.
Good
Well,
reference.
so you've been nerfing flasks and other things to that basically. Actually, let me just read the question. After the nerfs, the flask and the rebalance to armor evasion, the removal of dodge, multiple block nerfs. It seems that at an early stage, nowadays you demand either the use of determination or grace,
Yeah.
either determination or grace or both,
Grace
and
buff.
you kind of have to have a very high health pool or a spell suppression to not just get flat out one
Oh
shot.
my god, amazing question.
Which leaves the players in kind of an awkward situation
Or
where you
pigeonholed.
either have these things or you just get run over quite fast when you're near sort of the endgame yellow-red maps. Let's see here. So how do you feel about these changes to this? And are we going to see a similar thing in PoE 2?
Right. So I don't want to comment on the PoE 1 balance particularly, because it is not my
Right.
expertise. Like if Mark was
Right.
here, he'd have a whole rant about that. However, what I will talk about is philosophy of a few things in PoE 2 with regard to this. So number one is, it is not the case in PoE 2 that I would want every character to be running auras, right? Like that should not be the case. And another thing actually around this is that in PoE 2, we're getting a little bit more strict again with the fact that gear is supposed to be adding flat things, and the tree is supposed to be more multiplicative, and something like an aura also should be more multiplicative in general as well, I would hope, although we do need to discuss the specifics of those particular auras, which means that, like, something like determination and grace should not just be your one-stop shop to solve your defense problems. Like, it should be that the items should matter a lot, and then you multiply what your items are doing with other sources, ideally.
So I actually think for me, one of the best, like, I'm not a huge fan of our defenses right now. I think it's been on and off like a little bit okay for a while, but then now it's a little bit like we don't have that much choice. And strangely, I actually feel like defense in Path of Exile was in the single best spot, surprisingly, when flasks were Giga OP, and where flasks covered your entire defense were mapping. And mapping defenses were not that interesting. And it was basically, if you had a quartz, a jade, and a granite for mapping, that was enough. That's all you needed. And there was no need to have more defenses than that. And then, that is a bit of a downside. Like, yeah, your mapping defense would be just that. But you would have really interesting different ways of building defense for bosses. You would have really interesting boss-specific defenses. I remember I had like a character specifically for Awakener and stuff like that. So I quite like that when Flask was enough to do tier 16 maps. We have a lot of choices, but it's monsters that pigeonhole you into certain defenses. Yeah, I guess. I was surprised that they didn't just make spell suppression easier to get on gear and like remove some of the mitigation. That's what Steel suggested too. I thought that's what they were gonna, or both me and Steel thought that was what they were gonna do. Make it 30% mitigation, but like just as easy as it was to get as a launch.
Yeah, there's almost no way to get armor or evasion flat values outside of your gear pieces. You're not. There's almost nothing that you can just take to be like, I can't afford the gear, I'm using this unique, so I'll use just a random aura or any mechanic really outside of gear.
But in general, your tree should be multiplicative. There was actually, you know, I had a whole rant about this that I gave to the whole company at some point in recent times. I'm just trying to remember the specifics of now. But we were talking about, there was kind of a concept that we discovered about like flat things are like I had a better word for this, but a sort of despecializing in a way, because when you add a flat thing to something, like everyone gets closer to being the same when you add flat values on something, and multiplicative things are specializing because they mean that everyone, like the person who is already better gets even better than that. So we have to decide, like, from what sources do we want things to be specializing and from what sources do we want things to be despecializing. And the tree should be a specializing
gateway,
like thing. It should, like, because the idea with the tree, the whole idea with the tree is that you're picking the things that are going to synergize well with what you're doing, right? Like it's supposed to be an amplifying force to specialize your character in a certain way. Whereas the items on your character can be despecializing. Like you can use items to overcome issues that you have otherwise, but also you're just picking what you like. But like in both cases, you're picking like what you want to do with your build, but it's like you actually want them to have different roles to make them feel like different things.
Yeah.
And then the question becomes support gems. Should they be a specializing or despecializing element of your build? And we came to the understanding that they should actually be something that is despecializing, I believe is where we actually ended up, because it's like the idea is that like you can use a support gem to overcome like to change what a skill, like if we want a support gem to change what a skill does, if they were a specializing thing, it would mean that, okay, you like that would actually mean that you want to use a support gem, the same support gem with a given skill all the time, right? Because basically it would just be for a given support gem that this thing is best with that skill. So therefore, like there's no real decisions at that point. It's just like, oh, I'm using this fireball. The best thing that goes with the fireball is this thing here because it has the most effect on it. Whereas
what he's talking about is my favorite thing in video games. I don't think I always necessarily liked it, but my favorite thing in video games is difficult choices. There's nothing I like more. Whenever I feel like I'm just surrounded by choices at every point, and I'm like, man, right now, like for example, the Atlas, and this is, I think they could do a slightly better job of ascendancy. I think Champion is a bit like this, but I don't feel like every Champion and Pathfinder is a bit like this. But that's always what makes me feel the best in video games, when I'm like, oh my god, like I really want that, but then I lose out on this. And Charms is the same thing, right? Like there's so many good charms. You're never going to be able to get the best. You're always missing out on something. And I think as a player, you should always feel like you're missing out on something great. And when video games manage to do that, when you think you have so many fun choices. And as Havoc put it one time when we were discussing this, a choice between different OPs, right? Because any game I've played where the choice is, well, why wouldn't you take that? There's no other choice. Like, it's so dumb if you don't take that. That's a bad game, in my opinion. Unironically, Ruthless Ascendancies do this better. Right. Cool. So I think that's like the best thing you can do as a game developer is difficult choices of OPs. Whenever you have an obvious choice, it's bad. Like that. This actually illustrates exactly why I hate Diablo 3, because in Diablo 3 you don't have that. Well, okay, I don't know if it's different now, but maybe it's crazy different now. But the last time I played Diablo 3, the game was telling you what to do, and it was filled with obvious choices. Like the game was filled with obvious choices, and that's why I hated Diablo 3, because at launch it wasn't like that. But I was like, oh, I'm being told to play this skill by this set, and like now I'm being told to do this, and it's the obvious choice, and that makes me like lose all interest in a game. Whereas like even in PoE right now, I feel like I have so many different builds to play, and so many different things. I have like so many of the new skills I want to play, and I love just like divining replica dragonfangs and be like, man, I can do this, I can do that, and like Ascendancies should do this a little bit better, I think.
Whereas if they're despecializing, they actually mean that you actually have choices there. So that was a non-obvious answer for that one. It's actually opposite of what you might initially think when you first see it. But this was a new way of thinking actually about things that I think that we sort of had, like on some level we understood this intuitively, especially with the tree and the way that items were, but it was not an explicit understanding that we had until we actually sort of broke it down a little bit there. And so that understanding kind of came to sort of guide the philosophy there. Seems like it's getting way off the topic that we originally had here, but it does sort of matter a little bit, because when you're looking at a skill, a skill should be I think should be more of a specializing thing, which is why something like an aura then would imply that it should be multiplicative rather than flat. So that's like a whole long-winded answer about how we get there. But what that means is, yes,
Right, we love you,
should
Jonathan.
probably be multiplicative. You know, like I'm interested to know whether or not you think that sort of logic there holds up over time. But yeah, that's the that's the whole thing.
This does mean something like the ignite.
Do you know, that's quite a hard thing. That's quite a hard thing, which I think is very, very hard for gamers, because when a developer explains something like that and you're asked like, what do you think about it, I think it's kind of hard to, in the moment, I don't know, at least for me personally, like I need to think about it a little bit, like yeah, like what you're saying sounds good, but do I really like it? Like it's kind of hard to like think of like in the moment while in a podcast and be able to go like, well, no, you know, actually I think that's quite garbage, right? Who are these streamers? They're PoE streamers. PoE streamers. I saw in the comments people are being really toxic towards Rise and calling him a Lost Ark streamer, but it's like, it's embarrassing because yeah, Rise plays Lost Ark, but he still plays more PoE in like the first 2 weeks he plays PoE than the people complaining do in the entire year they play PoE. So it's kind of cringe for them to criticize him for playing other games. It's like, if you play PoE less than like 5,000 hours a year, shut the fuck up. Like I hate it when people like criticize other streamers for like just like chilling in another game and stuff. And I think it's so great. I saw like loads of criticism against, actually, honestly, everyone interviewing right now has had so much criticism. Like even like Darth and stuff, and like Quinn gets loads of criticism. I love that they're like getting like questions from so many different type of people. And like with the interview that I'm gonna do, I am actually, so the last time I focused a lot on like just community questions and asking things for other people, but I really like something Jonathan said. I think it was in the Crypt interview. He wanted to focus on questions that you think are a problem, so that's what I'm going to focus on. For me, I'm going to focus on things that I think are important, things that are important to me, because absolutely, I don't speak for everybody, but I do feel like there is a decent amount of people that do feel similar to me about different topics I bring up. So yeah, it's not going to cover for everyone, but I'm going to focus on, because then I know the problems. I know what I feel. I 100% know what I feel. So yeah, I will not cover like everyone's concerns on the podcast I do, but I'm going to really focus on the things that I think is a problem. Write down what you think they'll answer and write a follow-up for that. That's a great idea. That's a great idea, Sai. Actual Gigabrain. Actual Gigabrain. So like I won't even take requests really for questions. I'm just gonna think up my own questions. I'll go over them on stream, and Skrya's gonna help too to formulate them better. Ask the questions you want answered. Do you have a better idea what you feel wrong? Yeah. That's how I'm gonna approach the interview. Because the last one, I think it did quite well though, and that was a bit of a different one. But for the last interview I did, no, not the last one, but I don't know, third last interview I did. It was when they were addressing problems for the community, and then I tried to represent the community more than myself. But that was more of a like, this is a bad time in PoE kind of jam, so that was a bit different. Sorry. GGD are amazing, letting so many people interviewing them. Yeah, they are, but it is also a marketing campaign. So yes, but also like it is still a marketing campaign for them, right? It is smart. This is their marketing campaign for the existing PoE players, which is kind of what I requested. I was like, where's the marketing campaign for the people that do play PoE? But this is it.
Support should be about making it
Oh my god, I'm only 25 minutes in. I'm basically
a
Asmongold.
skill that is bad at igniting and better at igniting, rather than just further capping your ignite chance. For
Exactly,
something
because
that's
yeah,
already bad.
it's a way to use a skill in a new way you weren't using it before.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas the tree is like, I'm specializing ignite with what I'm doing. I need to multiply the value of my ignites.
I say the same for spirit reservations, where they are multiplying something. You've already focused on shocks, so using Herald of Thunder on your weapon will further take advantage of those shocks.
Right. Yep. All right. There you
I
go.
feel like that plays really well into one of my favorite things about PoE 2, which is removing all the life from the passive tree. I feel like
Yes.
changes like this synergize super
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
Such a good idea. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Which,
Yeah.
again,
It's hard. I think there will always be things. Oh my god, I'm talking so much. There will always be things in a game that feels mandatory. There will always be things in a game that feels mandatory. And I think it is important to remove those. But you will always have them. I don't know. It's hard.
further makes the defenses on your gear and your defensive passives more important, because that
Yes.
is your main axis of
Yes.
defense then.
Correct.
Would you want there to be an easier way to then specialize either into, say, let's say, on this playthrough I want to be evasion stacking, on this one I want to be block or armor, like where it's, because right now it seems very difficult to go, at least from an early stage, to say I want to just go block, unless you're like Necromancer that has like a cheap way of getting there.
True.
It very much is, you have your armor evasion, or would you rather have like certain classes would specialize, or should there be a broader range that you can choose from the start?
The block is one of those. I mean, because the idea with block is like that is a multiplicative defense that you get if you're willing to give up damage by sacrificing one of your hands. So the reason why block is kind of independent of those is because it's supposed to intended to be multiplicative with whatever else you're doing, so that can always be the decision of, am I using my right, left, well, I guess whatever hand for defense.
Do you know what I like about the DDD devs? They seem so human. That's what I like about them. I don't know how else to phrase it, but very often when I see like big company people talking, they don't seem human. Do you know what I mean? They're not human. I don't know, relatable? I don't even know what to call it. They seem human. I like them. They're very likable and humanable. They're very humanable. Sincere? Yeah, that's it. Honestly, that nails it. That's how I feel. They seem sincere. You mean not Zuckerberg? Yeah, like, I don't know, but whenever I hear a lot of people talk, like even when I met like David Hasselhoff and stuff, I was like, we are not on the same plane of existence. Like, I don't know. It's just like very different lives. Like, it's nice to feel like you're on the same realm of existence as the person you're listening to talk. Because that's not always the case. That is not always the case.
Or am I using it for more offense? So that's kind of like where that ends up. So I don't know that.
I did, Scott. I did.
I don't think block is early game should be your primary defense.
Love you, buddy.
Because it is
Right.
the multiplicative thing on top of whatever your primary defense is. Yeah.
And it is a very strength-focused mechanic, even more so in PoE2.
Yeah, I guess it sort of is. I mean, like, in all cases, whatever is on your offhand is going to be being more defensive.
Right.
Well, no, I shouldn't say that. What I should say is, in all cases, you can choose to use your offhand as defense or offense, right? So whatever class you are, there's options in your offhand that are going to cause that to be the case. So block is one of those, but they have to be multiplicative with what you're doing in order to make that choice meaningful. So yeah.
How does energy shield factor into this? Because you
True.
remove life from the tree, but energy shield is a defense, but it kind of acts more like life than the other defenses.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Where are we at with that one, Rory?
It's definitely a thing of like how you recover energy.
I love that. Over to Rory. Not my problem.
Shield is a significantly more controlled thing where you're not expecting passive energy shield regen all the time. It's not like life where you can just expect to get constant amounts of it back. It's a barrier and a buffer that is not reliable 100% of the time without serious shenanigans in effect. But there's always serious shenanigans available.
That's
Doing a
good.
flat energy shield on the tree?
I want serious
No, I
shenanigans.
didn't think so. Yes, I thought it was multiplicative, which it should be under that philosophy. Yes, we don't have flat, so yeah, multiplicative there.
We expect ES might be a bit more controlled than it is currently, because I'd say in PoE1 right now, it's pretty good to solve energy shield recovery through various means, leech and wicked ward and things like that.
I mean, chaos inoculation is definitely a source of endless discussion because of how it implies that it should be your one-stop shop for defense, but yeah, more discussions to
Under
come on that.
discussion. Got it. So following on from the topic of defenses then, is how do you feel about time to death? From effective
True.
signal to actual death. Is this something that will be...
This is going to be such an interesting one. This is going to be such an interesting one because I really like hardcore in PoE. I think it's done really well. It's the best hardcore I've ever seen in any game, by far. I don't know that it's perfect, but I wonder if they can do it better in PoE too. So I've played, I play a lot of hardcore games. I've played like, oh, maybe Darkfall was better. But I played a lot of hardcore games, and like D2 and stuff is a lot worse. Like D4 is awful. D4 is like one of the worst hardcores I've seen. But what's so good about hardcore in PoE is nearly every death you have is your own fault, and it's very like it's very you can learn from every death. Now, you kind of do have to, like, record. Like, it doesn't have a good death log and stuff like that. But, like, there are no, like, random one-shots in PoE that's outside of your control. The only one that's, like, still a little bit bullshit right now is DD. But even that, for the most part, does have, like, indicators, right? So if you go through my RIP playlist, most of those are fair deaths. Scry actually recently went through my RIP playlist and started looking at what I've died to. And I think DD is the one I've died to the most. It's the only one that I've died to, like, significantly more than anything else. There was 6 or 5 reflect deaths in 25,000 hours, for those that were wondering. I think there was, how many did Scry say? Was it 20 or 30 DD deaths? And there has been things in the past, like volatiles used to be really unfair, but it's an incredibly fair game for hardcore. Whereas, like, you know, I was never a huge fan of D2 hardcore that's, like, you know, just randomly dying to dolls and stuff. I always, like, really dislike those, or just getting chain stun locked. But I think it's in a really, really good state, and I wonder if how they're going to do that for PoE 2. I hope they'll be able to do that to feel as good. And that, I kind of want to, I'm curious to hear what they say here, but that's something I want to most likely follow up with. Because obviously that's something that's very important to me. Because I see a lot of software players talk about how bad you die in this game, but realistically that is because you guys don't know what you're doing always. And I'm sure quite a lot of people would admit that. They probably don't have the strongest defenses of their characters when then they're like, fucking one-shots, man! My 2k life character got fucking one-shot! Bullshit! So it's like, you know, yeah, sure, but like, what are you doing here, man? It's like, I was for a while asking people to show me what maps they were dying in, And there was one guy that unironically asked what he did wrong, and he was running a crit triple damage map, and I was like, bro, you could have just like went AFK in a map. Like, crit triple damage is fucking cracked. You know, it's like, oh nice, you're taking 800% more damage in this map, and you're wondering why you died. So, you know, it's, especially as a hardcore player, this is something I'm like, obviously passionate about.
Changing substantially from PoE 1 to PoE 2?
So, I guess there's a few elements of this to talk about. So the first one is, obviously we want to make sure that signaling attacks should be always good, right? Like there have been failures in PoE 1 of that for sure. We want to improve that. We've kind of talked about that a bunch of times.
That's gotten a lot better. I really want to press them on why DD should exist. Full stop. Because that's actually something I vehemently disagree with. I don't think enemies. I don't think that's ever a good thing. I don't think enemies having a corpse life based damage is ever a good thing.
The time to death
Ever.
in PoE 1 is probably too short, but I want to stress the fact that we're not going overboard with changing it. Like what I'm saying is we can multiply the time to death by 5 and go from 500 milliseconds to 2.5 seconds, and that's still fine. You know what I mean? Like it's a different situation. Like what we aren't going to be is a game where you have a big health pool and then someone grinds you down over 30 seconds. You know what I mean? Like recovery. Like we are still a game where your life changes quickly from one state to the other. Like,
That's fine.
and really the buffer of like life resources either come from your flasks or other recovery mechanics that you have. Like your life pool will change a lot, right? It isn't going to be just a slow grind down. But
it will be much slower for it to go back to full when it's nearly empty. So being hit by a heavy hit from a boss is 1 or 2 seconds, if not significantly more, of like risky time.
Because the issue is that if it's like 5
fine.
milliseconds, like it can be right now, then there's literally no way to kill your player except by one shot, which isn't good. So it needs to be higher, but like I wouldn't want people to think that that's going to be a long time. Like it is going to be short amounts of time, just not like literally milliseconds like it can be at the moment, you know? Like it should be, there should be fast.
Do we know? Will we have instant flasks in PoE 2? Do we know that? I feel like I don't know if I have instant flasks in PoE 2 or not. Do we have rollable flasks in PoE 2? I feel like things have been changing so much, even from like last ExileCon, that I don't fully know a lot of things. I swear they say they won't have cast on full flask. Cast? That's not what I meant. Didn't they say flask only refill in town? No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about instant flask. They probably don't have specifics. Same with Endgame. Yeah, I might ask about that. I mean, I'll go over questions with chat to make sure that anything that has been answered, I don't want to ask duplicates. We know very little about flask yet. It's a good topic. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, we're doing a gauntlet this thing. I'm doing Jonathan and potentially Rishi. They specifically wanted me alone for the first interview, and then I want to see if I can get... I don't know, I asked Quinn if he wants an interview. If so, I will try to make a stalling one as well. I don't know if Quinn's keen or not. He hasn't replied.
Fast changes, but yeah. Hopefully that covers what you were kind of asking about.
Yeah, it seems like, and it makes sense with things like the flask changes and stuff like that, restricting availability of healing a little bit more, and what we've seen from the combat, that you would be heading in that direction, where there's a little bit more time for you to capitalize on the fact that someone's taken some damage.
Yes,
Yeah.
but not too long.
So now I gotta clarify my understanding of what instant flask mean. So you can roll a life flask right now to activate instantly. It's seething or bubbling, and that flask will either give half of its effect instantly or the entire effect instantly. And they haven't specified whether we have that in PoE 2 or not. It's actually my first death ever in PoE in 2013 was because I didn't know you could roll flasks. So I didn't even know instant fast was a thing. So I probably did have time to react, like 2 or 3 seconds. But I got bursted down by like sub-fizz archers in Fell Shrine Ruins on my Firestorm zombie character. So being able, like, D2 flasks are very, very important for being able to react on hardcore. Like you need to have a counterplay. Like the game needs to tell you, hey, you're in danger, you're about to die, and there needs to be a counterplay, right? There needs to be something you can do. It shouldn't just be, hey, you should have had a stronger build. Like that should be part of it for some things, but there should generally be like, hey, you can either leap out of the way or use potions or use some sort of Val skill. Like it's important that most things like that have a counterplay that you can do as it's happening. I assume they're gonna answer with dodge roll stuff? Maybe.
Yeah, I get it. We're talking about the difference from instant in current PoE to, you know, a tenth of a second, which is a long time in the concept of an action RPG when you're operating on reflex and stuff. I get it, yeah. Rise has a question on gearing through the vendors.
To what extent will you be able to gear through the vendors during the DM and Gazi interview? It seemed like gold will be a large part of itemization, especially in like the end game with the new crafting changes and whatnot.
I would think to say that it's a large part is not really correct. Like it is a part, right? Like you should want to go to vendors and look at them, but I wouldn't say that. Like I mean, I would not imagine that like I don't think the primary source of the items in your character is going to be vendors. Like absolutely not. Like it's just something that honestly the main thing I think in early games it's going to help a lot with regard to improving, like filling up all the holes in your character. And then at end game you've got gambling as well, which is another thing you can do.
That is a vendor.
Can be a thing, but once again I think to say a large part would probably be overestimating.
But the gambling is a vendor. That's part of what he's talking about. The gambling is not a different mechanic. That is a vendor. That.
Getting the effect.
You'll get some good items from gambling at some point, but you're not being geared up by gold.
Right.
Well, that's one of the concerns from that interview, and I was very excited to talk about things that I look forward to in PoE 2, but I wouldn't be myself if I wouldn't talk about one of the bigger concerns overall. And so far, I've heard really, really good things that I really, really like. But one of the big problems was the crafting and potentially the vendors, the gambling, because from the looks of it, we are going to be picking up a lot more bases and then attempting to use something like a Chaos Orb to remove something and add something. So wouldn't gambling play into that pretty significantly? And like,
I mean,
it can definitely come in.
It can definitely come in. I think so. I think the fear you're talking about is like, like people look at the like drifts of items on the ground in PoE 1, and then they're like, oh, if I had to pick all these up and look at them, then that would be bad. But I think that like the context of that is I don't think you should have that fear. Like, yes, I want people picking up and identifying items, but it's not going to be the case that you're picking up like, you know, like hundreds of items per map and being like, I have to look at all of these every time, right? That is absolutely not going to be the case. Like, there are more item system changes we have to discuss that I think will illuminate this a lot in the future. But suffice to say, yes, it is an explicit goal to get items on the ground to matter a lot, right? We want the items on the ground to matter a lot more. 100% we do. But don't necessarily take that to mean that you're going to be spending your day identifying rares like and like after every map for like a freaking half an hour, right? Like it's absolutely not going to be the case of that. So I guess all I can say about that is don't worry. Like when we talk more about the way that item drops will work in PoE 2, I think that will become more clear. And there are big changes there, like quite like changes that I think like when I first pitched them.
Make them drop identified. Oh, I don't know if that gets asked here properly, but I really want them to, I don't know what else to call it. It sounds toxic, but defend identifying items. Because my take on identified items is that it's an outdated ARPG mechanics. He says like a lot. There's nothing wrong with that. I use filler words too. Yeah, I want them to justify identifying. but that sounds like kind of confrontational. But like, so my take on identification is that it's a CRPG mechanic. It's not, in my opinion, an ARPG mechanic. So CRPGs, games like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, and stuff like that, like in my opinion, identification only makes sense in a game like that when like identification needs to either be like a resource that's limited, like do I want to identify this item or that? I cannot identify both, or at least I cannot identify both right now. Maybe later I'll have more access to identification, but I can't right now. And then when you can when you can wear things when they're unidentified and there's a chance that it has a downside or it's cursed or something like that, then identification makes sense. But I don't really feel like identification any longer makes sense in an ARPG like PoE. And like, there's no identification in Last Epoch, and that works just fine too. Like, I don't think it's a to-date mechanic anymore. So I don't know. It's just a step that's not really necessary anymore. So I definitely, I don't know if it's talked about in any of the interviews I've seen. I don't think so, but I want to talk about that a little bit because I think it's a little bit, doesn't add anything. Please ask that question in your interview. It's a good one. I'll write it down. Where's my notepad? Identification outdated.
Them to Chris, his first reaction was, "What the hell?" You know what I mean? Like, and then, like when I sold him on, when I explained the reasoning, he's like, "Oh yeah, actually, that's awesome." You know what I mean? Like that's a thing that's like, yeah, there's stuff there. So we'll talk about that in the future, but it's quite different.
I don't want to say anything because I'll give something away.
Fair enough. And the thing with that as well is that, okay, so like it's funny as well because when I talk about major changes here, like to a player who doesn't understand PoE.
If you don't need to identify, you can pick from the floor all the good items with filters. Not good. I disagree. So personally, my take on it is a lot fewer items should drop. I personally am against nearly every item in the game being dead on arrival. I think I would rather drop a lot less loot and like, oh my god, I dropped a ring. I'd rather have that feeling. Not like ruthless, but like that there is a bigger chance of an item being good and having less items. And you can still drop a decent amount. I think you can drop a decent amount of white and blue gear. You can drop a decent amount of bases, but rare gear could be a little bit more rare. Like, again, not ruthless levels, but I was so excited when they were experimenting and talking about loot 2.0, when they were like talking about doing a huge reduction in loot and instead making loot better. What they were experimenting with, and I'm okay for a lot of whites dropping because that's easy to filter out and has a good purpose. So I think like bases for crafting, yeah, like the gear at the end of heist is so cool. Like you look at all of those rares because there is a big chance that you will get a really special piece of gear there. So I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of that. I don't think, in my opinion, there's not a huge reason to have literally 99.9% of loot we drop is dead. And I think, if anything, they should strive harder, which Last Epoch is another thing. Man, Last Epoch does so many things right now. They should strive a little bit harder for item being both found and crafted that is good. And maybe like that you're finding things to finish. That's what I really liked about recombinators. Right now, crafting is a little bit too good in PoE, and we don't have that much drop-only stuff. We could do with a little bit drop-only stuff. Like, I love veiled items for that reason. So, I don't know. The games can learn a little bit from each other there. Hinakora's lock was a mistake. Things like that can be okay when it's a little rare. I don't know. They're hard to have in a game. The problem, and why I'm a little bit inherently against things like that, is when something... I don't know if this is a weird take or not. This is how I feel about it. When something like a Hidden Chorus lock is in the game, I don't feel like this with mirrors, but when something like a Hidden Chorus lock is in the game, and you have a way to save your items safely, you might sometimes end up waiting until you get that, and if you never get that, then it just lays there in waste. Whereas, if the only option is to YOLO it with an Orb of Annulment, then you're going to use the Orb of Annulment. But if you do have an option that's really rare, that like you have that pipe dream of like, well, I can safely do this eventually, then you might wait. So I really like the like, you're kind of forced to annul it. It's like, oh, you ruined your item, unlucky.
It'll probably seem like
Is the podcast frozen? So it's a video, so I'm pausing it to talk.
things, but it's like internally they matter a lot, and like they'll change the feel of the game quite a lot. So it does matter a lot to get this exactly right.
It's not live.
Yeah, for sure. Because that was absolutely. I looked at it very much from the PoE1 perspective,
Yeah,
and
for sure,
I'm not gonna
for
lie,
sure.
I was pretty concerned, especially.
I think the reason Hinagoras are fine is because they're almost as rare as a mirror. I think the problem there is almost. I mean, yeah, it does depend a little bit on you as a player, but I feel like there's a reasonable expectation I'm going to find a Hinakora's lock. So there are items I'm saving for if I find a Hinakora's lock. But yeah, if I don't find it, then those will have just been sitting in my stash rotting for no reason. So it's a tough one. It is a tough one. Amunia, thank you for the 20 months. They're like four or five times more common than a mirror. And even a mirror this league, I mean, obviously Steel's already found one, but I would have said we're guaranteed to find at least one mirror this league, like between me and Steel. Well, I did say that earlier in the league. So it's a bit different this league. That's just this league, though. You're right. I mean, we don't even know if Hinakora's lock is going to be in the game next league because it's not a core item. Part of the league mechanic. So I guess they're experimenting with having Hinakora's core. So I guess it'll depend.
Of like power creep that used to pick up like one of something and that felt okay, but now that you're picking up 1,000 of that one of something and you're having to move it. So...
But that comes back to, by the way, the thing before about the 1000x thing. Like the reason why we even have that as a guiding star is because we want to make
it is core. That's incorrect. It does not drop on standard, so it is not core. It is in the currency tab. That is not the same as it being core. They are on standard because they were in the game before, but you cannot drop them on standard. Therefore, it is not core. That is literally what that means. If something can drop on standard, it is core.
make item rarity be able to improve your drops by 1,000 times without relying on quantity.
That's hard.
And that is hard, but that is what we have to do to be able to, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is where the 1000x. So the conversation that even came up in the office, I mean, like when we were discussing this and why that even became a thing was because, yeah, like, okay, like, what is the maximum amount we want players to be able to scale their drops by, right? And then once we've got that number, how do we make it so you can do that with only rarity alone and not quantity, so that you.
I think that's a little bit of what I don't like in PoE. I don't like that there's two stats. That is a very big difference with Diablo 2. I don't think that there's a good thing that there's a prefix, a suffix, and a suffix. I don't think that's a good thing. Maybe that's my biggest problem with Magic Fight in PoE. That there are 3 affixes on gear for Magic Fight. I think gear would be... I think MF would be a lot more interesting in Path of Exile if there was no quantity. Quant is a mistake. I'm going to bring that up on the podcast if they don't talk about it now. I think quantity is a mistake. I think there should only be rarity and only as a suffix. Keep watching. Okay, cool.
Don't end up with the drifts of items on the ground. So that is the challenge. That is the thing the drop system has to be able to solve. And that is the reason why a number like 1,000 times needs to exist, so that we can work out what needs to happen internally to be able to make that happen. If you see what I'm saying. So yeah, that's kind
I
of where
agree
that
with
comes from. So I guess that might have been a bit less. There might have been less context for that number when I originally gave it than this is probably a better explanation of why that exists.
There's also like pack sizes are multiplied.
Quantity is good for currency? No. Quantity is good for everything. That's the problem. Quantity is good for everything. Quantity is a huge mistake. Remove MF uniques? I would say remove Magic Find uniques and remove quantity on gear at all. Have literally only rarity. I think that would solve everything. It's a good idea.
Are at the moment that we want to have far less of a focus on because it also disturbs the like combat composition of packs and things like that. So it's like the fight is designed like each of those fights is sort of
Yeah,
a
so-
really high fight.
Right.
Suddenly there's 5 times as many casters doing the freezing thing on you, then you're not going to have a good time.
Right. So not which isn't to say there won't be any sources of pack size. There will need to be some, but it probably shouldn't get quite so out of control in some ways. But the thing is, you do want to feel like there's some like this map is crazy. There's a bunch of shit in it. You need that too, but like there's still, but it can be a bit of off the wall right now.
With the
So you need to
rarity,
be careful.
with the rarity thing, sorry, it almost sounds like you're pushing towards some sort of like rarity makes the quality of rares better or something like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, we can talk more about that later. But I mean, there's
Yeah.
We've said too much.
we're probably saying too much already. So
I'm very close.
and the reason
Warmer.
I don't want to talk too much about it is just because like there are a lot of specifics around this that we need to get tested and working out correctly. Like it isn't done enough to be able to really talk about.
Yep.
But
excited.
yeah, there's stuff to do there for sure.
My imagination's running away.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Can't
I
stop
remember
me.
when Chris talked about that a lot. Like Chris used to talk about the smart systems, but not just. It kind of got implemented. It felt like for currency drops, where you get less of like the smaller currencies, and then whenever you do
Right.
drop them, it's a stack, or like you get the better ones.
Oh my god, that's such a small thing, but honestly, one of the biggest things we've had in PoE. Holy fuck, dude. Like, even literally just for like the irrelevant currencies like whetstones and armor scraps and transmutes, oh my god, dropping a stack of those actually feels amazing. Like, it's such a good thing that they did. So good, dude. Absolutely out. Love it. Dude, those things that don't let you regen above 50% are so fucking scary. Like, they're not like not like scary as it's gonna kill me, but it's like, oh my god, my heart sinks every time because I think I'm taking damage. Well, I am, but I hate Executioner. It's a really well designed mob. Wow, I got 6 fracturing shards in one map. Holy.
And I think a lot of PoE 1 players were expecting that eventually, sooner or later, it's going to happen for loot and even unique items, and you're going to have that effect of, what was at the time called smart loot, which I don't know if it's still the case. So
The
seeing
thing that
for
Chris,
PoE2 would be
the
great.
thing that is called smart drops, which from back in the D3 days, is something we very much don't want to do, which was tailoring the gear that drops to the character you're playing.
Oh no, I hate that.
Right.
And that we do not like.
No.
So
No,
that's
awful.
That I think you might be thinking of times
No.
when Chris was talking about that.
No,
stuff.
no.
Yeah, like
No.
we don't want to we will never resort to that.
No,
Like,
that's not what
we
he's talking
feel like
about.
it's important to have the feeling of like I found an item, but it's for someone else, and I'm going to trade it now, and like that.
No!
feeling is part of the game, it's important.
They misunderstood this question, and Rise didn't follow up on it. No, that's not what they were talking about. No, the Leopleurdon. Okay, well, I can follow up on it. Oh, they were not talking about D3 Smart Loot. The Rise was talking about Grand High Smart Loot, which Chris was talking about. Loot 2.0. So the big difference is, okay, so I'll explain, because some people might be confused by my no. So Chris and Rise was talking about Smart Loot, which in the PoE context, Smart Loot was loot that makes more sense, right? Like a amulet dropping with +1 fire gems, life, crit chance, and cast speed makes sense, right? Whereas, let's say, an amulet that drops with attack speed, cast speed, totem placement speed, and trap throwing speed doesn't make sense, right? So that's what they were talking about. They were talking about like making loot make more sense, like well rolled, in the context of the item, right? Like for example, a axe dropping with fizz damage, lightning damage, fire damage, and cast speed doesn't make sense. So they were talking about that. Whereas Jonathan mixed it up with the Diablo 3 smart loot or what other RPGs do. Like if you're playing a Warlock, more Warlock gear will drop. Like D4, where you will not drop any gear for things you aren't playing. So there was some miscommunication there. I will try to follow up on that because I really want to know what happened to PoE smart loot or well rolled stuff, because I think that would be one of the best things ever. Doesn't that kind of screw off meta builds or people doing wonky stuff? No, I mean they can craft their own shit. Like that's fine. It's just like things should and not really. It doesn't really. And things should just make a bit more sense when dropped, that's all. Things should just make a bit more sense.
So, like we will never
mean,
do that, but what is important, yeah, is just making it effectively so that the stuff that drops is more valuable without it requiring us to multiply the number of things on the ground by 100 times.
Yep.
So yeah.
I mean, gold is kind of a way of doing the smart drops where you're then buying the item slots that you would want.
Yeah, so you can actually move a little bit of the way to do that, just because then you buy the stuff that's good for your character. But yeah, that's not the majority of the not the big focus, but
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always think about like PoE players would abuse this and it would make it super unfun, where everybody would play like
We
Pathfinder
would never.
because Pathfinder gets the most valued drops.
Yeah,
and now-
maybe, yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Chat, we would not abuse anything, would we? We're innocent. We would not abuse anything. We are the goodest. Did I bring 2 chaos? Did. Backsize.
Noogie has a good follow-up about crafting tools in Path of Exile 2.
Well, let me actually like, flip the question, or just so you initially, for those who can remember, you introduced the orb that was called the Eternal Orb, and then you removed it, and now you reintroduced Hinokora's Lock, which is essentially like the same thing.
It's not.
So I was thinking, are there anything that you kind of regret with the PoE crafting system?
Hinokora's Lock is actually a lot more interesting than Eternal Orb. It's actually a lot more interesting. I really like Hinokora's Lock because it lets you show different outcomes. Like you can check a Hunter Exalt, a Conqueror Exalt, or Warlord Exalt. Like you can check different things. It's really, really interesting. With Eternal Orb, like honestly, they could both exist for different reasons. Because with an Eternal Orb, you do something, and you can keep crafting. Because you could technically, on an item with an Eternal Orb, you could Exalt, annul, Exalt, annul. Okay, no, we really fucked it up. We really fucked it up. Let's load. Like, an Eternal Orb? Eternal Orb is a save game, and Hinokora's Lock is a time portal. Sort of. That's not a good analogy either, but they're very different. Lock doesn't guarantee a good roll, just more options. Well, no, they can both guarantee a good roll, but they're very different. Well, it's not necessarily 1,000 times better either. They're just different.
Or that you want changed in PoE 2, and why?
Wait, let me hear that
Exception
again.
of Harvest.
That you kind of regret.
Yeah, we'll start that
How
over.
you reintroduced Hinokora's Lock, which is essentially like the same thing. So I was thinking, are there anything that you kind of regret with the PoE crafting system, or that you want changed in PoE 2?
A lot, I
and
think.
Why?
With the exception of Harvest. Sorry.
Yeah,
So
let's
I
not
guess,
talk.
like-
I'm
you
mainly
gonna
talking
include it?
about like
I get-
currency drops that you use to craft with.
Well,
And, like, the philosophy behind that.
there's a couple of things we could talk about here, because one of the big ones, which we've already talked about how we're changing, is Chaos Orb, and I think and Scouring. So like,
Poor Chaos.
it's sort of amazing the degree to which those two items affected the way the game is, and honestly, the way the drops on the ground are, and all of that stuff like that. Like, it took a long time for us to understand the fact that when an item can change completely in one currency item, it results in the only thing mattering about an item on the ground being the base type.
True. That is true. And actually, I do this a bit too. So I'm actually fairly against the Chaos Orb changes. I don't really like them. But something at least I do as a gamer is it's very easy to think as something else, something just being taken away from you, right? And I used to think even more like this when I was younger. Like I used to be very against Soulbound in games. Now I think like Soulbound is one of the best things you can add in video games. You just need to be careful where and how you add it, because the reason I was so against Soulbound is because it's just something being taken away from me. I am losing something, and I didn't see the benefit. But the benefit is that there's a lot more power. Like Sanctified Relics were more powerful because they were Soulbound. So sometimes as a player, it's very easy to like, yeah, we're going to be losing the way Chaos Orbs work. But like he just pointed out there, we might be gaining other things because they can now afford to make other things more powerful. I kind of like the philosophy behind the new Chaos Orbs. Yeah. I can see myself warming up to it. But that's just because of the... You might not know what you're gaining. What is being changed? A Chaos Orb will remove one and add one. It'll remove one and add one stat. So it's like a annul Chaos, or a annul Exalt. Chaos Orb is like an annulment and Exalted Orb.
And that's bad. And so that is like a very important, like a very important thing. So I absolutely regret how that was, but I don't think that there's a way we could have even understood that where we were back when we designed that originally. So it's kind of like, yeah, like it's hard to say that I regret it exactly, because that would imply like, oh, I just kind of screwed up and didn't have foresight. Like it really is, like it took a lot of, I guess, like design maturity to get to the point of understanding that. I
get it.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I look at something like Eternal, I don't think I regret Eternal at all either. I mean, I'm trying to think back to why it is we even removed it in the first place. Like, do you remember?
People are making perfect items.
I think it was just another way of people getting perfect items more reliably, and we're
Yeah.
like, there's already a lot of ways to
But like, I mean,
edge towards that.
Hinakora's Lock is already like does bring that back, right? I mean, but the UXs of Hinakora's
It
Lock
does.
is better. But I mean, it's like, I don't know. I'd have to go back into the archives and work out what exactly was going through our heads at the time. But like, I mean, sure, like there's those, right? Those base ones matter a lot. And then when you look at like, you know, all the other crafting systems in PoE, I mean, on an individual basis, there are individual mistakes, sure, like where things like were too powerful or whatever. But I don't know that they quite have the same level of like importance that something like Chaos Orb and Scarring have in terms of affecting the whole game and the way the whole drops. So, like, I don't think that like anything that we've done in any of those other crafting systems really quite broke the drop system to the extent that those orbs did. So
I do think we're now much more careful not to make sure that a League's currency or League special reward is not strictly better than a Chaos Orb. Like, in every case, you would rather use this than a Chaos Orb to do
Right.
what Chaos Orb was intended to do.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
at least not without some severe restrictions
Right.
to it.
Okay.
So you're saying you want to
Scarring's
keep like the
removed from
base
the game?
currencies more relevant and the others to be more of a alternative rather than a replacement?
I don't know that that's the motivation. It really comes down to not breaking the drop system. That's like the key
Okay.
thing. And yes, it's nice if that is a nice thing to make sure of as well, because it's a nice secondary goal. But it really is the just don't break the drops, right? Like make it still fun to find items is like really, really important. So yeah, I think that's kind of really the key element.
And do you intend items to become 100% perfect again in PoE 2?
I mean, that should be hard, of course, but it will be able to happen. I mean, yeah, like at some level, like what's the point of the ability for something to exist if it never exists? Like it should just be very rare and hard, right? You know, like I don't. Think,
but you could intend for something to be, say, like you get to the 99 percentile, but you're never really reaching like the perfect, like where
I see what you
everything
mean.
locks
Sure, I mean, you
into
always
the-
want something to strive for, I guess, is the thing there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's honestly like
I mean, it'll be mathematically near impossible.
yes, it's mathematically
But it'll
inevitable at some
happen.
point, but it'll
Right.
happen eventually. But you know, like the
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
But certainly, when you want there to be stuff to strive for, right? You absolutely want that. And I
Yeah.
mean, like,
They should ask if it'll be mathematically impossible in the streamer client too. I'm such a shitposter.
There should be rares that you can strive for. You know, like like the most amazing rare should be a thing that is hard to get. So, you know, yeah, like there's stuff like that.
Man, should I do that? Just like completely deadpan between two serious questions. Just like completely seriously be like, so will the streamer client be available in PoE 2 as well, or is that going to remain a PoE 1 thing? Just completely stone cold. Oh shit. That'd be funny as fuck. I don't think they'd like that. I actually did reach out to Chris and asked if he would do, because I wanted to do a 1st of April video about streamer client. He actually declined and said too many people believe that it's real for him to want to joke about it. Like, they do actually get emails and stuff from people complaining about streamers having a special client. Like, literally a lot of emails. A disconcerting amount of emails. So they actually didn't want to do that meme with me. I thought it was hilarious. And it's really funny because, by the way, there are games that do stuff like that, but it's generally more ill-reputable games. Like, I know Genshin was giving away loads of stuff to streamers and told them like not to say it publicly. Like, there was loads of drama about that. Or was it Genshin? It was one of those gacha games. I think it was Genshin. So it doesn't happen. But, yeah. It's more in like bad games lol. Streamer queue was the worst? I mean, it wasn't the worst. But, yeah, it was bad. Even though that was very good for me personally. Because people were very happy I left the streamer queue. Gotcha games, yeah.
The other thing as well, well, no, actually, you know, I'm not going to go into that because that's more other stuff that I probably shouldn't talk about yet. But yeah,
It
There's
is
a lot
also
of
going
that.
to be that, like, if you have an item that's 95% of the way there, it should be that you keep working on that item rather than, like, actually, let's just start from scratch because I've got a higher chance to, like...
Has anyone asked about mini games like fishing? Because I really like that in my games. I'm a big fan of, like, not like, they don't need to be, like, super in-depth, but I really like just cozy things. I really, really like cozy things to do, personally. I'm a big fan of that. Blight is a minigame? Okay. I'm talking about actual minigames. Message time now? I don't know. I really like that in my games. It is more of an MMO thing, but even though Path of Exile is an ARPG, I feel like it has a lot of the MMO feel to it, in my opinion.
Bring it from a base
Okay.
type back up to that point.
that can be dependent a little bit, I think, on the situation. That's more iffy of a philosophy, I think. But yeah, there's going to be a lot more to talk about items later for sure.
In current state of Path of Exile,
We, in my opinion, should not be able to skip the campaign. So, like, that's not something I would even ask. Like, I will focus my interview on things that I'm concerned about. And, like, because, yeah, I realize I don't speak for everybody, but there does seem to be quite a lot of people that feel similar to me about a lot of things. So I will focus on that, because I did like what Jonathan said about people will always say, like, oh, this is something people have an issue with, and you're right, a lot of people do have an issue with that, but it creates problems where people don't have problems. So I actually don't think campaign should be skippable. I think Diablo 4 would be better if you had to do the campaign once per season. Like, the game would just objectively be better. And I think a better solution, in my opinion, is, which Last Epoch does now, based on my recommendation, and talk about that in a sec, but the best solution there, which I do want to talk about, is having strong, exciting things that you find on your endgame characters, like 7 League Step and stuff, that is good for your new characters, that change the leveling experience, because that makes it a lot more exciting for me. Like, yeah, it took me like 5 hours at least start to make a new character, but now with these like new items, like, it's such a different experience, and it's now going 3 hours or 2 hours to get through the campaign because of these items. I find, I think that's a lot better, and then you still get to keep that content and make it more exciting, and that's something. So Last Epoch, actually, like, I talked to the devs a lot there, and they asked me for advice on things. they have like basically a twink gear leveling system called making legendary items, legendary potential. And I said, why does this have a level requirement? And they told me, well, we don't want people's leveling characters to be too strong. And I was like, why not? Like, why is there a level requirement? And they didn't have a good answer for me. And now they, because I said that, they removed the level requirement on it. So you can now make super strong leveling items that change your entire leveling experience. Because they didn't have a good answer for why you shouldn't have super strong leveling characters. And I was like, thank you, much better. And it's so enjoyable. It's so enjoyable. Like, I have so many times where I'm looking forward to leveling up a new character because I have a super strong legendary potential. That was the worst thing I've been inside. What's the list of questions you have? I'll go over that another time. It's quite a long list, but I'll probably do a stream and go over that.
Well, the best items can't really drop because of the nature of things like influence modifiers and stuff like that that are only available through crafting. Is that something you'd be shifting away from with PoE2, I imagine?
Somebody in chat said, I actually hate twink leveling gear. It's just boring and there's no progression with items. On softcore, there is no progression on items during the campaign anyway for 99% of players. And that is a large part why softcore players have a bigger problem with the campaign than hardcore players. Because on softcore, the campaign is a chore. Like every time I play the campaign on softcore, it feels a lot worse than it does on hardcore. It is entirely a chore. There's nothing stopping you from just corpse rushing bosses. You have no problem going through the campaign with 30 fire res, and it is a huge chore. Whereas on hardcore, that is not the case. You do need to upgrade. And there's generally like the point of the campaign on your second character onwards is not progression. Anyway, that's the point of our endgame.
I don't know that I've got a really like a fully thought through answer for that one.
And there's just a lot of design space and league mechanics and
Yeah,
game rewards that only really works if you then add it onto an item you've already got or something like that. So it's hard to say, nah, that'll never happen.
I mean, you the implication there is that the perfect item even exists in the sense that, like, I mean, clearly, I mean, items only are perfect in the sense of perfect for a given build, right? Like, there should be multiple axes of what can make a perfect item, and so, like, ideally, all of those influence mechanics and things are sort of changing the builds you can do, like making it so a different thing exists. Like all that. I guess what you're asking though there is like, should influence mechanics, should they be more important from the ground than from crafting? I don't know quite the answer to that, but I guess
influence items should drop with similar to Veiled. When an influenced item is dropped and identified, it should be like Veiled, that you can never craft something as strong. Like, I wish PoE had a little bit more drop only stuff. Last Epoch does really well with that as well, but like I'm a big fan of incursion gear. I think Recombinators made them excel and made them really, really stand out. Delve gear is really interesting if we have. That is a little fixed in PoE2 though, absolutely. Absolutely. But I think dropped gear, having one stronger modifier than, or things being one tier higher than you can craft. I love shit like that. Because then you can have crafted gear and identified gear be a lot stronger. Like, I think both can shine.
we'll have to see when we get there.
From a different angle, I guess, the drops that I enjoy the most these days are things like delve modifiers dropping and temple modifiers and fractured items that have, like, I look at one of those items and I say, oh, this is a special item that I can do something with now.
And betrayal.
Oh, being able to say this is a thing I can do something with is absolutely an explicit goal of the new stuff, right? Like that
funny.
That once again, that's the Chaos Orb change right there. Is like, here is an item that I could modify, as opposed to this is a base type I throw away and I could just use any, I could just, scour out.
Maybe I should just shut up and watch the interview.
Just throws away everything about it. So yes, the key thing is basically when you look at an item, it should be, what could this turn into? Like what steps can I take to make this awesome is the primary thing you should be thinking about it.
Yeah, awesome.
Or is it just not good enough? Like, there's not enough there to be good,
I like talking, okay? It's why I became a streamer.
All
Because
right.
I don't really have any talents.
Topic a little bit. I haven't really felt like I've heard much about transfigured gems and Vile skills in Path of Exile 2. Are they like alternate types of skills like that going to be a thing?
I mean, it's absolutely been a thing during skill development that be like, oh, what if it did this completely different thing? And we're like, yeah, we're going to need to make a Transfigured gem for that at some point.
So we'll need to work out exactly what the system for gaining them is and all that sort of stuff like that. But yeah,
They could have like an area with traps that do percentage based health, and there could be like a boss you have to fight, and there could be like, for the first time you get in, there could be like trials that you have to open, but you only have to do them once per league. And like the boss could have like really like cool quotes and stuff. Like steel is the hardest of all metals. And like there's so many cool quotes you can put behind. Oh man, I have so good ideas.
yeah, but actually, Val skills and in particular work way better in a PoE 2 skill context than they did in PoE 1 because they would just be
Rippled Val
different
gems.
gems. They wouldn't be they wouldn't be so actually probably the Val be than they did in PoE 1 because they would just be different gems. They wouldn't be they wouldn't be so actually probably the Val
No! Wait, what?
would
Does he mean like they'll be separated again? I don't want that. That was the biggest change they did in PoE 1, combining the Val gem with the normal one. That was so nice. I don't want that to change.
probably be more like how Transfigured gems are, where it's like there's a way to turn a gem into a Val skill, and then presumably because it can be a 6-link now, it actually makes more, and because you've got more skill slots that can be 6 links in particular, like the idea of a skill I use occasionally and have to charge up is way more relevant.
I guess.
in PoE 2 than it would be in PoE 1.
I
mean,
suppose.
we'll have to look at the exact stuff around that, but I think that the system overall, like the idea of that stuff, works way better now. Than it was.
Yes.
I always feel like Val skills have been a little bit underexplored, perhaps, and it does seem like there's a lot of room there in PoE 2.
Agree, and I think it's hard just due to the nature of the way that the
I
PoE
like
skill
Val
system is.
Spark.
And
Yeah.
I think it can be a lot better in PoE 2 for sure.
All right. Rise has a quality of life question for us. Love you, Rise.
I kind of want to follow up though first on on Transfigured gems. Do you feel like it was a success? From my perspective, it's like the greatest change ever to PoE. I know that it probably took quite a lot of effort, but are you guys happy with the outcome and how the players received it?
Also a fan.
It is a success, and I think that it's nice to have a venue to just.
I think there's maybe too many Transfigured gems. I mean, this is a very hard thing to fix, but I think there's too many Transfigured gems where the Transfigured one is just a no-brainer. Like, it's just objectively better. I think SRS is probably the best done one, where that's just balance. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you're right. This is the first interaction or iteration, but I think it's very, very important that ideally, they're like very different. They're very different. Even in Penance Brand, for clear, the trans gem is much worse. Yeah, but it's so nice when they've made it like very clear. I think, in my opinion. Like, or sorry, they've made it like too clear. Like the SRS one was really good. It's the best example.
Just like, what if a skill just did some totally random other thing to explore? Like it's sort of easier to like explore a different balance option in a transfigured version of a gem than it is to modify the original gem. And that's kind of a nice element that we can just kind of do now. Like, and I think that just makes it easier. Like, just sort of uncuffs you a little bit with regard to like being able to just design some different things. So I think that is very good.
Right.
And we're gonna continue to make more transfigured gems for each expansion.
Oh, that's good.
Like, just make a bunch of them and throw them in there. I mean, like, they're relatively easy to develop, so like, there's really no reason not to like throw stuff like that in.
I actually, the reason why I love Transfigured gems and what I think was so good about Transfigured gems is we were getting at the point where like people are asking for new gems every fucking league, and it doesn't really make that much sense anymore, right? We started getting like, I feel like Cracklands was when it got a little bit silly. It's like, here's Arc but different. Like, it was just like, there's only so many fucking new skills you can make, right? Like, we have most skills that are possible to make now. You know what I mean? So Transfigured gems is like the natural step. It's the natural step. Volcanic Fissure, yeah. It's the natural step. Here's Molten Strike 2, yeah. So it is really like perfect. It is perfect because now they can just make like, yeah, this is different ball lightning, literally.
So yeah, I think we'll do more of them for sure.
Nice.
Yeah, it's definitely trickier in PoE2 where each of the skills are far more like handcrafted and all their stuff going on, but
Right.
they're too cool not to do.
No, we'll definitely do something like that.
Interesting, like
Interestingly,
PoE2's combat is much more like combo oriented, right?
Mhm.
So that
Sure.
is that why?
Yeah, that is why.
It's, I mean, definitely plenty of opportunities of like, this has just changed the skills element, and that changes a lot about it because of all the factors involved in each skill. Cool.
I feel like it takes the reins off you guys a little bit too, because if a transfigured gem is a dud, no one really cares. But if like a core skill's a dud, everybody cares. Like, it's disappointing.
I mean, the like Mark was just saying, he's like, oh yeah, I'll just be ruthless. We'll just like cut 10 of them if we don't like what they're doing. Put 20 more.
Where
in.
is this?
Like that kind of thing. Like
Hold
it's just, that just like whatever. You can just go ham with it. So, that's all good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright,
Well,
jump back to you.
Yeah, okay. I'm still not asking my question. This is a different question then. When it comes to
All right,
because
man, come on.
Rory's here and Rory knows everything. So I have been getting this a lot about PoE2. Will people still be able to play one button builds?
True.
Because that's been happening a lot. It seems like everything's combining, but people are pretty concerned about will that still be a possibility?
I can't see a way that it would end up being more efficient than using your skills in a
Right.
clever way.
Okay. Yeah.
But laziness is
I
increasing.
am sure there will be ways to do
Reservation.
that, but I wouldn't say it's a goal of ours to preserve. But also, I'm like, hey, all of these like automation gems are cool. We
Fist
should have
reflector,
a bunch
yes.
more of those and things like that. And so like it kind of ends up just being that like the nature of the tools we give players will just kind of mean that will probably be possible. But I should hope it isn't more efficient than actually like doing more than that.
And yeah, we've got cast on dodge roll. You can dodge a roll around triggering your spells to do stuff, but you could be using that spirit for something else.
you
You could
remember-
be using more other
I remember there was
Wait, that's a real thing? You're not joking?
Oh yeah, it was brought.
Yes.
Someone
Yeah, yeah,
brought
yeah.
it
That
up
sounds
with
fun.
Silicon, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are just like, oh yeah, let's implement it.
yeah, custom dodge roll thing. But I remember
Like,
there
of
was
course
a
it is.
conversation between Mark and one of the other designers. I don't remember which one it was now, where they were like, "Oh, I just want to be able to have a one-button build," and we were kind of like, "Okay," so like, and he's like, they were like, "Oh, I just want to use this skill," like they were saying, and we're like, "Okay, but what if you just, but then you could get a bit more damage if you did this," and they were like, "Oh, well, I guess I could use that."
See, I don't know how I feel about it because it is probably better objectively for the game when there's great opportunity cost to only using one skill. That is probably objectively better for the game. But it does feel really nice to use a one button build. It's a hard one. It's such a tough one.
That as well, like, yeah, sure, I'll add that, so it'll be this, but then I'll just use this occasionally, and then I'm like, oh yeah, but then you could use this skill with like combo this, and like would increase your damage again. Like, oh yeah, okay, so you're right, I should add this one as well. And and pretty soon we had like 5 or 6 skills they were using, and it's like they talk themselves into having more. So I mean, if you present like things that will improve people's builds to them one at a time, they'll tend to want to add them, and then pretty soon they're not using one button build anymore. So like, yeah, it changes.
Ooh.
Yeah, I my hope is that you won't want to be a one button build because you'll feel enticed by the cool things you could be doing. So that's my hope. But yeah, I'm sure that a one button builds will be a thing.
And we have sort of, when looking at these builds and how they play together, said like, okay, the right combo here to do is like play it like a concerto piano where you've got 15 different keys you need to use in the right sequence of optimum damage. Like, that's not going to be fun. It's
Right.
going to be like using the skill when you see the situation has come up
Right.
to use the skill and thinking about when to use it.
The more interesting question to me is how good will the 0 button builds be? Like that's
True,
the
like auto
question I
bombers and
have.
stuff.
We still have to play around with that, I guess.
I'm formulating a bonus question here, so bear with me. So I'm mostly pretty excited about the idea of these.
To be fair, I do think it's fair. The lazier you are, like the more lazy you want, should come at a higher cost. I think that's fair. in my mind, at surface value, that's fair, right? Like an auto bomber should always take more to build than something like, well, in current PoE, like desecrate DD, right? That's 2 buttons, because we don't use like, it's like something like righteous fire should always be harder to build than an auto bomber, or than desecrate DD, bladeful, blade blast, etc. As an auto bomber enjoyer, I agree, but it should be viable. I agree that it should be viable. I'm not saying those builds can't exist, like from where I'm sitting, but they should come at a higher cost. Same with like Spell Slinger, I think was in a really good spot because you lost a large amount of damage from Spell Slinger. Should be harder or expensive. Well, just be higher opportunity cost. Like it should be trickier to make work. You should need more things. Yes, the podcast we're watching is about PoE 2, correct? And I'm doing a follow-up interview on the, fuck, I keep forgetting, 30th or something.
Various situational skills and combos and things like that. But Path of Exile 1 has given us a very good example of ways in which it can become unfun, and that is totems on melee builds. It feeling like a mandatory and annoying thing to use for various reasons, like them dying and their placement and stuff like that. I think is an example of that kind of like bad comboing that makes it less fun but feels mandatory. Have you thought about that, discussed that, and how you might be avoiding that with PoE2's design?
Definitely avoiding stuff that is like, this is just a buff that you want to effectively keep up all the time, and sometimes it's annoying to keep up all the time, but it's just there all the time, is something we're trying to avoid as much as possible, especially because you can then weapon swap to like apply the buff and then go back. It becomes a chore. Much more focus on the combo skills being like, and now they're open, so I'm going to do a 10 times damage freezing spell on them that will just nuke them.
Melee totems, partly, I think, like, because melee's not really that great in PoE 1, and so it's kind of like melee totems are part of the kind of like attempt to make that better, like at some point in the past, and so like I certainly will want PoE 2 to have melee totems as well, but the way they work,
Melee? Oh, this is a hot take, I think. Maybe it's not a hot take. Melee is inherently flawed, right? Like melee is so like you fictitiously have to make melee viable, right? Melee is bad in video games for the same reasons that we're using an assault rifle instead of a fucking knife right now. Do you want to kill that thing over there while standing next to it, or do you want to kill it from a kilometer away, right? Like that's why melee is bad. You fictitiously have to make melee good in video games. Like, ranged is by definition superior to melee. Like, it is always going to be bad. It's always going to be a trouble to balance it unless you inherently give it more power just to artificially make it better. Because inherently melee is inferior. It just inherently is. That's why we used bows instead of clubs when we could. That's why we threw spears at mammoths instead of going up and knifing them. I don't know. Melee's always going to be an issue. You just have to like give it more power to compensate for the fact that you're in melee range. But that's not fun, and a game should be fun. Okay, first off, that's not why we play video games, okay? We don't play video games to have fun, alright? We play video games to be efficient. No, I'm just kidding. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But it's a hard problem to fix. I think I feel like Lost Ark did pretty good at it. Lost Ark does so right on so many things. I feel like I've played very few games that have better combat than Lost Ark. It's very incredible. Kind of miss it. Like, just such a smooth game. It's a shame, like, I hate the honing. Actually, I hate most things of Lost Ark. Well, that's not true. I hate a lot of things with Lost Ark. I hate the crafting and the honing and the... I dislike a lot of things. It has, like, so many things that are amazing, too. Isn't Lost Ark pay to win? Yeah, very. But it also has a very good free-to-play experience. Those aren't mutually exclusive.
I mean, what makes them so annoying, right? Like, what is it really at the core
That's
of what
the
makes them
question, right?
annoying?
Like,
I think this is the
what's your take
I
on
mean,
that?
the main thing that it's got a huge damage buff, right? And you
Yep.
might as well
Mandatory.
have that huge damage buff,
that is
which is
definitely
almost
will
certainly gone.
That will definitely need to go, right? There should be no reason why that should give you a damage buff like that. In
Yeah,
fact,
like-
why was that even done in the first place?
I feel like them doing damage should be the damage buff, right? Like,
Yeah,
rather
of course,
than-
right?
yeah.
Well, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't it be, right? Obviously. So why was that damage buff
Obviously.
even added? Why is that?
It's probably just because everything we gave Melee was some sort of buff to their thing if it wasn't.
But it
already.
was just kind of like an awkward ancient band-aid, I guess, at
I
this
don't
point.
remember why that would have even been added.
Might have just been to make them different from other totems. Just wasn't done the right
Okay.
way.
So,
Yeah.
but did they have that when they were added?
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
jeez.
The buff has been buffed at various points.
Dude, PoE is the only game that I can think of where even the developers and the people like me and Steel that have played for 25,000 plus hours, we're like, was it always like that? I don't fucking know anymore. Like, the game has changed so much and the game is so in depth. I remember I was doing a Path of Exile University lesson. It was called PoE 101. It was only new beginner tips. And Gucci Prada is literally one of the best PoE players, was in my chat. And he was like, I didn't fucking know that. And I was like, wow, this is like a beginner session. It's like so many like veterans don't even know you can like shift click deposit, stuff like this. And there's so many other tips like this. And I remember for a long time people didn't know you could corrupt or read color corrupted gear and shit. There's just so many things in this game. It's crazy. Oh yeah, I just literally learned you can shift click compasses onto your fucking void stones. I learned that like yesterday or like last week. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, stunts. Like, I think it was Matiki or something that was like, why aren't you shift clicking them? And I was like, the what? You can shift click the fucking void stones? Are you fucking serious right now? Yeah, see, loads of people in chat are like, what? Yeah, I literally learned that. Literally just learned that. If you have 4 compasses in your inventory, you can shift click them on your void stones instead of like dragging them on one by one. Because people were asking me, why am I dragging them on one by one? And I was like, what? As opposed to what? No fucking shot. Yeah, I literally just learned that. That's what I just did with mine. Yeah, I'll show you. I'll do 2. So I have 2 in my inventory now. Boom. Boom. And it just uses the ones that are in your inventory. Obviously, don't do it with your bank open because they'll just pick random ones, I think. But yeah.
The thing is, I feel I feel like maybe I'll even suggest this to Mark, but it's like we probably should just remove that and like
No, it's max.
make them better,
I
right?
think we already have in the plans.
Oh,
for
and,
those
and
skills
yeah, sure,
being
sure, sure. But
enhanced.
what I meant wasn't even in PoE1, maybe I don't know. Like either way though, like that's
Right,
not that not up to me. That's a Mark question.
I
But
think that's...
How much
but
scarabs
go on.
stacked
I think that's
or-
not why
12.
they're like considered bad though. That's
But
the
no, I agree.
aggravating
The other
factor,
element is the having to having to recast them all the time, right? That's your
Yeah.
concern.
for sure.
Which, I mean, it'll be an optional playstyle if you want to invest in melee totems and focus on that stuff.
Yeah.
And probably also you're investing in stuff that makes it far more convenient to
But
keep them up.
Then the question I
Exactly.
have is, why is it not unfun to recast your spell totems?
Actually, that's so true. That question is so true. It's a really hard question. Also, I don't think I've ever like reacted and commented so much on a podcast I'm watching. But there are some things where, like, with totems and stuff, sometimes people will be like, isn't it annoying to have to recast? It's like, isn't that like asking, isn't it annoying to attack every time you're at a pack with a melee build? It's like, no, generally it's not annoying. But there's so many things that like just seems worse than it is. Like, for example, the build I'm playing right now, isn't it annoying to have to recast my spiders? It's like, well, isn't it annoying to recast my spiders every minute or so compared to attacking every single pack I encounter? No, you know what? It isn't. It isn't actually that bad. It's annoying during boss fights, actually. But no, I don't know. It's just, some things just seem a lot worse.
Why is it? Like, what?
Because the spell totems are doing your damage. Like they're the main thing you want to
As
do.
opposed to
right?
the melee totems,
As
which
opposed
are
to
doing the
spell
damage,
totems.
right? So what you're saying is
Yes.
that it might be fine to recast the spell, the melee totems if they were actually doing damage to the monsters, as opposed to
Yeah,
buffing
if you're
you.
doing a totem
As
build.
opposed, yeah, right. So no, it really comes always back to the fact that they give you a damage boost, which makes them mandatory and makes it feel frustrating because you need to keep the damage boost up and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it all stems from that decision, I think. So I suspect, like, well, I have to admit, we haven't like prototyped melee totems in PoE2 again yet. Like that's not a thing we've yet done. So therefore, we haven't kind of then meant what that means is that we haven't like unless you am I wrong about that, Rory? Did we do it already?
It's technically functional, but we haven't played with it.
Well, sure. We haven't like had a whole like thing where we like, okay, let's get this in the right place kind of moment, like yet, if you know what I mean. So what that means is that like it's hard to then answer the specific, but I absolutely believe that yeah, it's going to be that damage bonus that's the primary part of why they suck. So that can be improved in that way.
I think like even zooming out a little bit, it kind of extends to other things that are like a mandatory damage buff that have an inconsistent uptime. Because they're dying randomly to you as the player, and that's similar to like wither totems.
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Looking forward to seeing how you address that in the future.
For sure.
Interesting topic.
Well, it sounds like Rory was already on board with that.
Yeah.
We just haven't gone through we haven't gone through that together yet. It's not been a thing we've gone through, but it sounds like you know what's going on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Glad we thought to explore that. Go ahead, Nugi.
I do think it begs the question a little bit, because you're talking so much about how you would always want to combo and use other skills.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that there is a specific playstyle or like an archetype, melee for instance again, or other spellcasters where there's a combo piece that you basically can never ignore. So how do you...
I understand what you mean.
Not...
It's a delicate balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only solution is balancing it well, and having the alternative is good.
But I think that the interesting point
just
there is
make
that
it play well.
Right, exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? It's the fact that the melee totems, when you're using them that way, don't feel entertaining to do. That is that is part of that big issue, right? Because as we were just saying, right, like the melee totem might be a thing that I would hope that nothing feels mandatory, because ideally, there's enough variety and things. That's not the case. But even if they did, at least if melee totems
I've only watched an hour. It took me 3 hours to watch an hour.
That would be easier to deal with for sure.
Yeah.
Do I talk too much? Do you like it?
Okay.
Now, Rise, if you don't ask your question, I'm going to skip it.
Poor Rise.
It's a total shift, but I'm asking, how do you feel about item pickup radius heading into PoE 2? Would it be possible for PC players to get a pick up nearby items button like on console, considering
Oh my God,
we're
can we
now
get auto level
getting
gems?
WASD movement?
So we just had an argument about this right before the podcast, and
Friendly argument.
Friendly argument. Yeah. I am of the opinion that we will need to increase pickup radius.
Oh my God,
There is
yes.
an argument for how much buy. There's an argument by how much buy.
That's actually the fucking nicest thing in Torchlight. Holy fuck, dude. In Torchlight, if you can see something, you can pick it up. I love it. Oh my God. I literally fucking hate having to be inside the fucking item to pick it up. I don't care about knowing that my character is touching the item.
One issue, of course,
10 years.
one issue, of course, is how do you indicate to the player that so with WSD, you don't want to when you click on an item, you don't want your character to move to the item, right? You want it to
Just pick it up magically with a fucking
you're moving with WSD.
magic hand.
So therefore, there has to be some kind of indication on the hover about whether or not you're in range to pick it up.
Does it? Why?
And so one way to solve that is just to
Wait, why? Why is there no follow-up on why? Why is that needed? I've played games where it doesn't have it. It has never felt needed. It does not need to be an indicator that I'm in range. Just fucking telekinetically pick it up.
pick up radius the whole screen.
Why aren't they asking
But
why?
kind
I
of feel
want
a
to
bit
ask
sad
why.
about that for various reasons.
I don't want auto pickup. I see a lot of arguments against auto pickup. Like I don't think auto pickup is good. I like that there's a conscious choice on what you pick up. I don't want like automation in my gameplay. I'm not a big fan of auto clicker games. Like that's my least favorite part of RuneScape, when you're automatically doing something. I like conscious choice, but I don't need it to be realistic. I don't need my character to like actually spend half a second picking up every item either. Like I don't want there to be a man. I can't believe I'm speaking this into the world, but I don't need there to be a pickup animation. I don't need my character to bend down, pick up the item, spend 2 seconds stuffing it in their backpack, and to drop it. I don't need my character to do the reverse. Like, you know, like spend 2 seconds. Keep watching. They discuss it a lot. Yeah, but that's good.
I kind of don't. I'm not really that keen, so we'll have to find a solution to that. It's actually not something we've solved yet. But yeah, it's something we have to do something about it, and that would of course also mean that various other factors relating to item pickups would hopefully get this annoying. And I mean, look, it's going to at least be large enough that like you'll be able to not stand in the ground fire when you will go to pick up your item. And that kind of thing. So it'll at least be large enough for that, but we just still have to just make sure that we get that feeling kind of okay and working it out. I mean, the thing that came up as we were discussing this was like just related to the whole you should never move when you're not pressing WSD if you're in that mode. Is like, okay, so what happens if there's a lever and you need to, there has to be some amount of your character moves a little bit, because you can't, you're not going to stand in the exact pixel that's the exact point where you need to do the lever, right? So there has to be a little bit of that, but we have to work that out.
Can you psychically open doors?
Yes. Well, then there's the next thing.
Yes.
Yes, can you psychically open doors? I mean,
Yes.
obviously the increase. I would actually.
Is there a big need for doors in ARPGs? I've never really been a huge fan of doors. I'm not a door enjoyer. I gotta say. I don't... maybe sometimes I struggle opening doors. I've never really been a big door enjoyer. Why not make it like Alva doors? Yeah. Doors work for the government? What? I'm not a big door enjoyer. Also, my wife just brought me snacks.
I think we should increase the radius of that even a little bit as well.
Nice.
Because I think like not so much that it would feel like you're not walking up to the door to open it, but like at least enough so that it doesn't feel totally fiddly to.
There's no follow up on the why. I'm not saying they're wrong. I want to hear the why. Like, it's so hard. I love that they're doing follow up podcasts, because like there's so many things here where I like. It's probably hard to do when you're sitting there in person. Well, I know it's hard to do because I've been in their position. But it's. I want to ask why. Like, well, why? Why do you need that?
To be able to do that stuff. So yeah, there's things left to do there, but yes,
Marry a Dane
I do
chat.
think the radius will have to increase a bit.
That sounds so good. And since you're kind of on this topic, how about when we talk to NPCs, when we're like got a menu up and we're getting attacked and there's ground effects underneath them burning us while we're trying to shop in their in-game vendors and.
We haven't made this change yet, but I am
Breeze.
actually very keen to make it so that you don't have to be right next to an NPC to talk to them. Like have the radius of that be increased as well. But there's a few other issues around that I need to talk to our UX
Personal
guy
space,
around. 'Cause I think we can improve it. The way
Freeze
that
the
feels,
screen.
so, yeah, the stuff
Ask
to do.
him.
Yeah.
All right, good. Glad you're
So,
looking into that.
just to be clear, so the argument was about the amount of range increase on the pickup radius, not whether or not it's a good idea to even
Yeah,
have
it will
that
increase.
in the
It
first.
will increase the question.
I'm eating mold. No, it's dragon fruit. Why didn't they ask about, like, my favorite thing was the ultimatum trial master free screen on decisions. I wish the current league mechanic had that too. I wish if I had a menu open, everything freezes.
Is how much
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. That's
yeah.
Okay, what about a telekinesis button then, like in Diablo 2?
Oh my god, I love
Opening
telekinesis.
doors and picking stuff up, but you have to, click a button. Maybe it takes a long time.
I like that.
Don't have that. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh my
That
god,
was
are we
too
getting
hopeful.
telekinesis?
All right, moving away from the quality of life once again. Going to
Yeah,
Newton
dragon fruit.
with a question about borrowed power from league mechanics. I'm interested about this one.
Yeah. Yeah, because we've seen it a lot. So just the 3 last leagues, it was weapon skill trees
With honey.
that then went away. Then it was tattoos that then went away, and now it's charms. Is it a trend that you see
I
happening in
love
PoE2?
borrowed power.
I think it's something we could that we will probably do for sure. Like
Dude, borrowed power is amazing.
I mean it's nice to have like a way to kind of do a feeling of a little bit of power creep in a league without having to be committing to it sticking around is
Right.
quite nice. So I think it's good to do that. But I mean, I'm not going to say that every league is going to always have something like that. But I do think I think it's a pretty good thing to do.
It's just a thin line to tread if it becomes permanent that you don't want to feel like, oh, now I have to do this league for this amount of time to fill up this slot in the
Right.
character and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right.
At the very least, making it far less like in every slot it multiplies it by a certain amount and
Right.
move on to the next league.
Yeah.
These are the reward structures I've been enjoying the most lately, for sure. Like, because they're the most interesting. Like, they inspire build creation. Like, Crucible
sure.
Trees inspired build creation. This league is
Yeah.
nuts for that.
Yeah, it's great when you feel it. It's great when
yeah.
you feel it.
For sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
awesome. So, with Path of Exile 2's enemies becoming tougher and more dangerous in more interesting ways now, can we expect to move away from lingering death effects, things
Running
that
out of
kill us
water.
after the monster is long gone and we're trying to click loot and whatnot?
Well, we did discuss the loot thing earlier, at least, so that improves that situation. But I do think that death effects they have an important place, and it isn't so much for like you kill the last monster and then the monster kills you after. That's not really what the intention is. The intention is that when you're in a situation where you've got monster, like multiple monsters, the lingering death effects of the other monsters are able to cause you to have to change what you're doing with regard to like how you're playing around that, and like knowing that a monster is going to leave a death effect
I'm gonna bear back.
afterwards, like kind of can change a little bit of what you have to do for the remaining monsters or when you kill them and that kind of stuff. So I think the lingering death effects can like do actually have a use for that, and which is the reason why we wouldn't want to get rid of them. Before the call, Rory was suggesting like, should we remove lingering death effects like when the last monster dies, something like that. I don't think I'm actually that keen for that because I think it's not very understandable. Like I don't think it will make sense to the player very much. But at least the loot pickup radius thing will mean that like that is not so frustrating.
I don't have a problem with things happening on death. I have a problem with percentage-based mechanics. I don't think the monster should have health-based mechanics. Do they talk about that, or is this all they talk about? Like, I don't mind death mechanics. I specifically mind percentage-based. Like, it's the percentage I have a problem with. Do they talk about that?
To deal with. But I do think they do have a place. Like it is important to have those things that can change the way combat feels like in the moment. Like something like you need to have it so that a mod on a monster pack can make it, can change things up. I guess the argument would be that like there's less of a reason to have that on things like rares because that's more likely to be the last thing you kill, which I guess is an argument. So we'll obviously look into that stuff more, I suppose. But it isn't a mechanic that's going away or anything like that.
I think it's interesting the idea of it like shaping combat is going on, and it sounds like the reason to not kind of remove them after the combat is over is because that's difficult to communicate. Is there then potentially another solution to that so that you can do that instead, if that's the only reason to not?
If you have one, I'm open to it. So
we'll get our top minds on it. Chat.
Yeah.
Interesting thing to explore potentially. Thanks for the insights. Rise, we have a question about respecking. Or do you have other questions maybe this time?
I mean, kind of. As a passionate hater of lingering effects, it mostly does boil down to DD for me. Because
Yes.
if I die to something like a burn and I'm not paying attention, and I go, "Oh, this was so stupid."
We've talked about DD already, and even PoE1's getting that changed. So yeah, like that.
Change.
Yeah. And I mean, look, that just comes down to making sure that they're seeable before the damage occurs.
Oh, but I
As
don't
long
care
as that's
about
the case,
that.
then
Well, I do,
that's
but
obviously better.
the problem with making it seeable is that unless you halt every other, actually, that's an idea. If you want a mechanic as dangerous as DD, everything else should pause. Oh, that's a genius idea. Why don't they do that? It's not about making... That's a big problem in PoE. A big problem in PoE is that, like, even if you make something really, really good visual clarity, let's say that something was really, really big visual clarity in the middle of this fucking Harbinger pack, right? I still wouldn't see it, even if they make it. But if the borders of my screen go gray and it looks like I'm about to fucking die, then it'll... Like, if a mechanic is so dangerous that everything else disappears, then it works. Like, that's something you can do. Because the big problem is, like, everything else still will... Yeah. That could be interesting. Like, that is the biggest problem for me. Or an audio key.
Okay, well, do you feel
Yeah, like a tornado warning. Obviously not actually a tornado warning, but yeah. Like and then it DDs. Obviously that's paraphrased. I don't literally mean that. But imagine a DD is going off on screen and it goes like and then it DDs. Yeah, like got the fuck out. Just no? Well, we can like different things. Noise Gate is doing God's work. We clip that and send it to them. Oh, do you want me to be the voice actor for the DD effect? I like it. I'm down. Bet. I don't like that sound. Even better. It should be a sound you don't like. You shouldn't be like lured to like, oh, that's a nice sound. Maybe it'll buff me. It should be like, oh my god, get it the fuck away from me. It sounds like I'm perfect for this. It's kind of like my stream anyway.
the respecking in the early game should be as difficult in PoE 2 as it is in PoE 1, leaving it really open-ended here. Not suggesting anything.
I honestly sort of don't feel like it's too far off wrong, I have to say. Overall, on balance,
Okay.
I'm looking at it. I actually think it isn't too far off wrong. That's a pretty short answer, I guess, but yeah.
That's weird.
I mean, until we really spend a long time playing with the, like, at mid to high levels, you get the split passives, and how does that change how you experiment?
So their take on this is so weird to me because they clearly care about making PoE more accessible to new players, right? Like from everything they're doing with PoE 2, this is really important to them. From everything I can tell, this is something they're really, really trying to do. They want to make PoE 2 accessible to people that have never tried before, and they want to capture that player base. The biggest thing they could do for that, literal single biggest thing, is easier respec during the early game. It is the one thing that Diablo 4 does really well, and a few other games do really well, that PoE doesn't. And that is early game respecs are completely inaccessible in PoE. I don't even know if they understand how inaccessible it is. To the point where like I'm like the biggest creator of new player content, and I will straight up tell people don't experiment because you will literally break your character. And it's not like that in most games. In Diablo 4, you can literally freely try and experiment with anything early on, and their endgame respecs suck. It's the opposite of PoE. Or late game respecs in PoE is done really well. It is really, really straightforward and easy. So it's like the opposite. It's very odd, and it's, I would say it is the single biggest thing putting people off as new players, because you just, I know so many players that have literally like tried, experimented, and then they were told make a new character. Your current one is bricked. Right? And it's not even an overstatement. It is completely bricked. Because if you get to level 60 and you've mostly, so this actually happened to a streamer called Lyric. Lyric was told by his audience to mostly invest into stats as a prank. But he put mostly like into stats. So he got to like level 50, 60, and he pretty much just had strength, dex, and int. Pretty much nothing else, like no notables. They were like, yeah, stats is really good, keep doing that. And at some point he couldn't kill monsters anymore. And then they were like, yeah, you actually have to make a new character. Like there's no way of him recovering. He can't respec. He has no other option than to make a new character. So his character is literally bricked. And like that to a lesser degree will happen to a lot of people just by playing the game, which is, in my opinion, not a good thing. Didn't he get regret orb handouts to fix it though? That's what I'm saying the game should do. You should have an easier time, at least in the first 40 levels, but ideally in the first 50, 60 levels, there should be an easier time to respec and experiment. I don't know if that is a regret counts for more at low levels, like some sort of dynamic regret scaling, because like regrets in the endgame right now is perfect, right? Like it's so easy to respec a level 98 character. Like by the time you have a level 98 character, there's no chance you don't have like 200 or 300 regrets if you're actually picking them up. Like how many regrets have I found this thing? 1,700. Obviously that's with MF, but like normally even I would have like 1,000. Remove regrets entirely? No, I don't agree with that. I think there's a reason for respecing and respec costs. I think there's a power to not have people be able to do everything freely, permanently all the time. I'm fine with that.
And that sort of thing, that might change the answer a bit, but it's hard to know until we've really got our teeth into it.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far off wrong.
I also think there's like you don't necessarily need to let people have free respect during the entire campaign too. Like, but I don't know. It's probably better. I think that would
Something
also
Dion
be better.
said in the previous interview with DM and Gazi was that's what rerolls are for. So I guess that's kind of like if you want to heavily respec, you just
Some
reroll.
extent, some extent, yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Alright,
push them on
Nikki, take us
that.
away for our next question.
I wanna talk more about that. I don't feel like there was enough follow up here.
Also, in the past, there have been issues that have seemed near impossible to fix, at least what you've said. So, for instance, desync was for a very long time is you just have to deal with it. We can't fix it. Are there
Right.
any things that now that seem possible to fix that might not have been in the past? Open question.
I mean, we've already made a huge number of like massive technical changes that
Interesting question.
sound subtle, like a frame taken away before a projectile is visible, and things like that that like compound to make the game feel so much more tight and
Toy.
so much more work involved in making it all like perfectly fitting together now.
You
but-
look at things like WASD, for example. That's the kind of thing that would have appeared to be on the too hard basket,
Yeah.
Right.
but you know, we managed it. Like we're trying to be as open-minded as possible with regard to what is fixable, and because ultimately the goal, as I hope it is with any game developer, is to make the game as close to perfect as we can. So I don't think that the attitude of like this is impossible to fix is one that I want to have around generally. You know, like it needs to be like, like it always needs to be like, yes, there is going to be a way, like there will be a way to address this. And so I'm trying to think if there's anything like to answer this question. I guess I'd want to hear an example of something that seems impossible to fix, so then I can kind of think about it. You know what I mean? Like, what's an impossible to fix problem? And then we can see whether or not it's possible. Because as I said, I try to kind of always think like, well, we can. You know,
I mean, I think a good example was actually the pickup radius, because that did seem as if it's something, no, we can't really do anything about it. And that seemed to be kind of the answer we got for a long time. So that was like very surprising to me, at least.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
death logs and damage recaps.
That's long.
It's not like that's impossible to fix as such.
EU
Right? It's not like a
servers.
technical challenge. Like desync is a technical challenge, right? Like it's we
Right.
just have to deal with this. Whereas pickup radius is just like, well, we could increase that number any time. It's a question of are we actually like the problems that like what you're okay when you're looking at something like that. What are we concerned about? Well, it's sort of like one of those game feel things of like, you know, just making the like. The problem of that is a more nebulous problem of like
Nebulous.
item
That's a good
weight.
word.
Like, does it feel like you're actually in a world? Like, do you just have mystical power? Like, you know, like the more sort of like mystical powers of like, you know, that break the kind of like world feel you do, the further away you get from this feeling of like that the world is actually physical and real and that it's serious and this kind of stuff, right? And so it's like on some level, I think that it's important to reevaluate those sometimes, which is what the pickup radius change is about. And like, but at the same time, if you just go too far with that, you can make the game feel like it doesn't really have the same importance and weight that it had before. And it's like it's really hard, I guess, for people to accept those kinds of arguments because no one change is the thing that does that. It's the collection of everything together that somehow makes the game feel real and like. So whenever we're making that kind of argument, it's honestly like I think this is the kind of arguments that game developers hate having to have with their audience because like yeah, you're right, like the game would be better if the pickup radius was larger, right? Of course, like that would be easier, like your game, like, you know, that sort of like it's like and then on the other side of that argument it's like some freaking nebulous thing about game feel that like, oh well, what the hell are you even talking about, you know, like I mean, like it's hard to even it's really hard to balance that, but yet it's like yeah, it's just one of those slippery slope things.
That's true.
So yeah, I don't know. That isn't really answering anything, I guess, on some level. But I guess what I'm just trying to talk about is just the tension that game developers have with their audience is often around these type of things, where it's like, well, yeah, obviously we could do that, right? There is nothing stopping us from making that change. Why aren't you? Well, that's a very hard question to answer, right? Like,
Do you know the game developer phrase "you think you do, but you don't" is actually very, very true. It is actually very, very true, because, and like, I'm not saying like game developers are always right, but you can sometimes have a greater overview, and it is quite often right. It is quite often right, more than we're probably willing to admit, where something objectively would be bad for the game, even though it like seems like it would just be good. I think that's true. So I do like that they stick to their guns a little bit and make the game the way they want, even if it's not always the game that I think I want. So it's definitely the case where I have faith in GGG. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? They've made the game that I love and play so much for so long. They're doing something right. They're doing something right.
Yeah.
Obviously, I could give you a headhunter. It would be great for you.
Yes,
Your
yeah,
game
of
would
course,
be much
right?
more
Yes,
fun,
absolutely.
right? Why wouldn't we?
Headhunters for all is a possible thing, right? We can go to the database, import headhunters for all. Why not do that, right? Why do we not just do it? You know, so yeah,
I mean, it kinda...
these are the hardest questions to always answer. Why are you not giving me the exact thing I want? It's hard to. I don't know. for reasons that it would make the game worse in some way that's hard to quantify.
Yeah, I agree. It's a hard
I
one
guess
to
that's all we
express
can
too.
say about that.
PoE 2 seems like an amalgamation.
I believe that if we had all this quality of life like auto pickup, you would get bored faster everything. Yeah, I don't think auto pickup is a good thing at all. I think auto pickup is a bit of a fail, in my opinion. I think auto pickup is one of the biggest you think you do, but you don't. I think auto pickup is terrible, personally.
Of that altogether. It's just kind of, okay, let's just make another game altogether instead of continuing.
Yeah, for sure.
Something I never expected to see was the ability to
pets,
pause
I
the
hate
game
them.
in single player, and as someone who recently became a father, I'm super...
But that also depends on the type of player you are, because there are people that literally play auto-clicker games, where you don't even play the game yourself, you just make some decisions every like day or so, and the game plays itself. There are people that just like seeing number go up. So it depends. So the problem is that you have so many different types of games, or certain different types of players playing the same game, right? Is it Elvior or something? I know it sounds like that. It's like RuneScape, but auto-clicker. It's like even more auto-clicker than RuneScape. So there are lots of people that like that game too, and there is an overlap with PoE. Melvor, yeah, that's it. There is a overlap there with PoE, so there are people that would like PoE. So like when I say like, so would you like the game to be like, well, you just stand in your hideout all day and pick up loot? It's like, yeah, well, actually, quite a lot of people do want that, but that is an entire game type. So there's like a disagreement there on like what type of game you want it to be, and that's fine.
Super excited about that, and very interested in some of the specifics.
RuneScape is not hard.
So you're
You know,
talking... Go
pause
ahead.
is absolutely one of those things where, like, I think exactly one of those things where it's like,
Yeah.
it seems impossible for reasons that aren't exactly real. It's just like, well, you know, we're a multiplayer game, we're kind of pausing, and it's like when you really like, if you come into that with the question of, well, what if we just stopped making excuses? You know, like what if we actually just didn't have that excuse and then we actually took it seriously? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess we could do it. And then at that point, it's like, well, yeah, I guess, you know, like yeah, I guess we can do it. You know what I mean? Like that it is just really that, I guess.
I need to ask myself that sometimes. What if I just stopped making excuses?
Exactly. Yep.
So some of the specifics on that I'm pretty interested in, and I saw a question in chat just now actually. So could you have something like pause on disconnect, or is there a reason that's not a good idea? Could you have something like pause on disconnect, or is there a reason that's not a good idea?
Wait, but they have that, no?
Well, the instance does pause on disconnect if you're in single player.
But you're like
Whoa.
not dying after you disconnect, or is that just in that time lag there, is it?
Well, hang on.
After
hang on.
6 seconds, it
Just to be clear,
activates?
though.
Hold on.
Right, so just
But they have that.
You guys don't know that?
when I say disconnect, what I mean is when the server determines you have disconnected.
Yeah.
Right,
There's a lag
because
there.
like we don't know you're disconnected until that happens, right? So the
Yeah.
question is like, it is impossible to understand like, is this lag or is this a disconnect?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing. So you know, this is an interesting question, not one that I have considered before, but like, no, okay. So here's the thing, right? You can always simulate lag on the client, So therefore, we have to very carefully think what could a cheat possibly do
Lag switch.
if
yeah.
they have the ability, so I just have to think about that. But I guess since the
No.
client can pause the game anyway,
Yeah, that makes no sense. They've already said that you have the power to click pause. Because they said you could pause the game, hover over a rare, and see what it does, so that you're able to like think about what you're gonna do.
why couldn't we?
Right.
Yeah, why couldn't
If,
you?
if the client
But I'm so
hasn't
confused.
sent a packet to the server for some very short amount of time, pause the instance in single player.
But they already said they could. What? During the interview with the Crypt, didn't he say that you can just click pause? They've already said that you could do that. Why are they now considering whether you should do it or not? I'm so confused.
Oh.
Hold up.
Is there a reason we
Not
couldn't?
manually? In the Crypt interview, he said manually. This is about auto pausing. But they've already said that happens too. They're considering doing it automatically. But they've already... Wait, what?
Couldn't do that. Let me just think
let him
about
cook.
this. Let me just think about this. So,
All
could
that
a
is the
cheat-
stuff they've
'cause you
said.
can pause the game anyway. So, if the client is capable of pausing the game at any time, then I don't see a reason why we couldn't pause the server if you're lagging. I don't see a reason why we couldn't do that in single player.
Right.
I mean, you can pause at any time by hitting the escape key.
Yes, that's what I mean.
so
You can
there's
do
no
that. So there
advantage
really
to
is
it.
no reason why we couldn't do that.
Oh, the
I think-
follow-on
I
question.
remember that was like
Yeah.
a giant point of contention because obviously a lot of hardcore players
Yeah,
are
yeah, no,
listening
for
to
sure,
this
for sure.
and literally,
Oh, for sure.
yeah,
That would actually be a fix to the hardcore lag death problem.
Yes.
Wow.
Right.
yeah. Because
I
I
will-
remember when Shaper
yeah,
used
yeah.
to pause the entire game, a lot of people brought that up, and there were some interviews with Chris where it was a little bit unclear because it did seem like you guys were able to slow down the game or stop it altogether pretty much immediately when that was recognized, but then it was never input, and people used that as an argument for the 6-second timer. And what
The
I'm hearing right
argument-
now is really good. I really like it.
In multiplayer, it has to be that way. We can't pause the instance in multiplayer, of course, right?
Right.
And
What happened with Ultimatum in multiplayer? Did it not pause? What do I need? Like 3 blue? Does it not pause Ultimatum in multiplayer? It pauses for everyone? Right. Okay, and I'm a bit confused.
we still can't tell the
Yeah.
difference between lag and not, and like getting disconnected is no fun when you just have a 1 second lag spike when you don't even know that you normally had it. Like this kind of thing sucks, right? There's a reason why you want to have the timer be some amount more than instant. You know?
Right.
But yes, we could in single player because because if you're not getting disconnected, it's not really as much of an issue. So yeah, there is actually a world where we could pause the instance in single player. Yep. No. Okay. Well, I will look into that. That could
Yeah.
be a thing.
Obviously,
I will
like
do that.
temper expectations a bit because, like, I imagine you have to explore the nuances.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
this and
yeah.
whether
But
there's any technical
I don't
limitations.
immediately see a reason. I don't.
Opium overload.
I don't know.
But this was so confusing because it seemed like Ziggy wasn't aware that they already had the basic pause functions. And then they started talking about, well, DCing. Because I've already said if you log out, the instance freezes and you're still there and it's paused until you come back. And you can DC at will. And what they're talking about now is that if you're starting to experience lag spikes, it might just pause it for you. That's what they're talking about now.
Immediately see a reason why we couldn't do that. So I'll talk to Reese, who would probably be the best person to talk to about this.
Rampant hype.
And
Let's go.
Hardcore is basically no longer hardcore in this game or in D4. People have become soft. In D4, I agree, but I don't see how in PoE. Path of Exile definitely has hardcore. Like, even with logout macro, you still die. You make a mistake, you die. Logout macro is like a skill shot in PoE. Whereas in D4, you're right. I agree. Diablo 4 does not have hardcore. I absolutely agree. But hardcore in PoE is really, really good hardcore. Like, and you don't even use logout macro a lot. For reference, I use logout macro less than 2 or 3 times per 800 hours. Other than like, you know, changing characters and stuff. But that's how little I use it. Like, yeah, I just don't really agree that the logout macro should be meta either. I mean, I've talked about this a lot. I have videos about it. I get where you're coming from. So I used to not use it because I thought it was cheating, but it is actually really good. I have videos discussing it if you're curious, and I can discuss it after. I'm very happy to discuss it after watching the podcast. Also, Luality, thank you so much. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion. It's a necessary evil because of imperfect computers and connections. But I agree with you. But it is actually really good in PoE because the only thing you end up caring about is, are you generally dying because of your mistakes or not? And in PoE you are. In PoE you generally die because of things you did wrong. In Diablo 4 you don't die at all because it doesn't have hardcore mode. So I agree. I agree on D4. I don't agree on PoE. But I'm happy to discuss it. I see where you're coming from.
Like, see if there's any reason why we can't just implement that.
Well,
Sure,
hot damn, I'm
why
glad
not?
I asked this question.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
Whoa.
For sure. It honestly had not been. I had not connected pausing and hardcore death as like lag spikes as a thing yet in my mind. So that connection
Well, that's good.
was very good of you.
Good
to
job,
point out.
Ziggy.
And
some people
Very
are pointing
pointing
out
Just
to
in
the
chat too.
Yeah, for sure.
6-second timer as an impossible to fix issue. It seems
Yeah, another
like,
one.
but
There you go.
apparently,
Taking them out.
maybe.
Sure.
So I still had some other questions about the pause thing. You mentioned in
Yeah.
like one of the previous interviews the idea of
Yeah.
like being able to look at debuffs and things like that
Yes,
that's
yes.
on your character and
Yeah.
how that's difficult to do in current PoE. Can you do that while paused?
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Um,
So yep, you'll
Amazing.
be able to mouse over.
You'll be
I
able
can
to look at
pause in
your
the boss fight and look at the
character sheet
mechanics.
yeah, look at your skills and see what your skill is currently, what its current DPS is in that exact frame.
Nice.
You
Ah,
definitely
things like
won't.
that.
So good for testing.
Yeah,
Yeah, you won't be able to change your gear and passives out
Yeah.
mid
Fair.
battle.
yeah.
That
yeah,
would
but
be
you can
pretty degenerate.
But the intention is that you can inspect your character and various things that you want to
Yes.
do.
How am I about to die? I see the Shaper Slime coming.
You can open up your character screen.
I also really like where they're going with the like, you know, logout macro and stuff like that in PoE 2. I think that's gonna be the perfect spot. So obviously, like after everything we have with PoE 1, I do like logout macro, and it sounded like it was getting removed in PoE 2, but now it's gonna be, if you log out, if you choose to leave a fight in PoE 2, you lose the entire fight, right? I think that's the perfect. It's perfect. This is a really, really hard choice. So I think PoE 2 is going to have a perfect state for all of this.
And
Handy.
things like that and skill info. Okay, great. So what happens if you get like a trade message or something like that? Can you like chat with other people while paused?
You can chat while paused, yeah.
Yeah, and
Ooh.
like queue up a trade, like pause and discuss a trade, because that's like an annoying
Yeah,
thing to
yeah,
trade
sure.
right
Why
now.
not? No reason
Yeah.
why not. Yeah, like
Sick.
all non-combat and like all non-game simulation packets. Well, to be technical about it, still work.
I'll start
while
hardcore.
paused.
Oh, so, that's a great question. I will most likely start hardcore. Well, yeah, I will start hardcore because I get to play it during the beta. So yeah, I will. It is such a hard question. Or do I play the beta softcore? Okay, so I used to always play the betas hardcore until whatever the one that baited Act 4. After that, I started playing the beta softcore. So when they were baiting the fight before Daresso, the only way to do that on hardcore was if you didn't get hit by any of the 3 monsters. They effectively did like 1 million damage. So if you got hit by any of them, no, not Barkwell, like the trio, the 3 exiles, they one-shot you. They just destroyed you. Yeah, the 3 exiles. They would literally destroy you. So yeah.
so there is
I
no
don't know.
reason you can't do
I might,
any of the things that
it's a
are
hard
outside
question.
of
I don't
the
know if
game
I'm playing hardcore
simulation
stuff
as
Nice.
well. You're
That's
for
paused.
beta.
amazing
Except
trade
for
quality of
parties
life.
and all those other,
Yeah.
and all those
Yeah.
other things like
Because
that.
right now, like being in the middle of a boss fight or something,
Okay.
you're like trying to type to someone like,
Yeah,
"Give me
yeah,
that, I'm in
yeah,
a boss
for sure,
fight," and you
for
like send it to the wrong person.
Yeah.
Press escape and take our time.
Yeah, you'll still have to like open the portal to get out of the boss fight. So if you
Sure,
like,
yeah, that's fine.
die when trying to open the portal and fail to make that trade, that's on you. But
So
Awesome.
is pausing restricted to? Because you said that obviously you can't do it in like group play, but if the players are in the same party but they're not in the same instance, can you still use the pause?
Yeah, of course.
And then what happens if somebody? You could.
Yeah,
So
and
then
if
what
someone-
happens if the game is
actually,
paused?
Now, what happens when someone joins the area while you're paused?
Exactly.
Area unresumed. And this is important to know because
Hmm.
if you're in a party, you are in danger of someone unpausing you. So you just have to be
Yes.
aware
Yeah.
of that, right? Like, you have to be aware of that.
Okay, so that's
So
just
this
something
is,
that's gonna work like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
In fact,
oh.
I believe we even
That's
discussed
fun.
this, although I don't believe I told any of the UI guys to actually do it. But I remember at the time we discussed putting a warning on the screen when you're paused in party that says,
Right.
warning, you could be unpaused by another player. Just so you know that, like,
Oh,
you know.
okay.
Okay, so if you want to grief people in hardcore, try to trade with people while they're bossing. Got it. Why don't they make it impossible to join an instance while it's paused? Seems much simpler from outside perspective. I agree with you. I agree with
One of
you.
you guys actually had that. I remember when we were
That's
discussing
brutal.
pause originally, that did come up as a thing that we had to make sure was on the screen, just so you know, like, you know, you're in danger of someone else. Because the other thing as well, by the way, maybe something I don't know if we even mentioned before is you can pause in party play if everyone pauses. Like if everyone presses escape, it pauses.
Oh,
So you actually can, but the thing is, that's the other case where it would be a warning on the screen if you could be unpaused at any time because another
Yeah.
party.
Anyone
You
who
could do
pauses, it pauses for
Yeah,
everyone,
yeah.
Why? Why not have a party option? Why not have a party option for leader can toggle pause or anyone can toggle pause? You don't vote for pausing in Dota. Anyone can pause, and there's a cooldown. Like, that's a really good idea. Should I bring that up? Because I would want, as a hardcore player, if I'm about to die, I would like my friend Steel Mage to be able to pause for me. Hey, Jax. I'd want my friend Steel Mage to be able to pause for me. Okay. Pause, toggle, party option. I wrote that down. Bring that up? Okay.
Yeah.
But you actually can pause in party play if that's the case also.
Oh, great.
This is like
Very
prompt
useful.
a pause vote or
It's not a
you just
vote.
pause.
Once everyone is paused, the game is paused.
Yeah, so there'll be like a thing that says
oh,
so and so
okay.
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
Like that,
paused
okay.
or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, so if everyone does that, it just
yeah, that's what voice comes.
Oh,
from.
one
and
character.
game auto pauses when you like do things that cover the whole screen, like open the passive screen and things like that. Will auto vote for pause, if you will. I mean, like you are considered to be I want to pause when those screens are open.
Right.
And so then
Well, I'm
Yeah,
just
the,
admiring the
if
menu.
everyone is
Hello?
looking at passives, then yes, the game will be paused.
Cool.
Or pushing escape or whatever.
Wow.
It is, so
Oh, that's so good for like co-op play with like a new player or something. Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, so if you're like, I want to go to the bathroom, you can.
I'm so
As long as you trust
What
your
the-
friend,
yeah.
as long as you
Oh my
trust your
God.
friend, then you can go do that when you're in party
It's
play.
amazing.
Oh no, you have to trust your friend. I don't like this.
Oh, all
I
right.
look forward
Anyone?
to the rip clips.
Yes, the PK ones. All right. Did anyone have any follow-up questions on that before we
I
move
do.
on to
I
Rise's next
do.
question?
Put me in coach.
Go ahead, Rise.
I have so many questions.
Is it the really, really long one?
Yeah,
Is
do
that
it.
one? Oh,
Grace.
this was mostly answered already. It was
Yeah.
about the items and the general concern about having to, instead of clicking a Chaos Orb 1,000 times, picking up 1,000 items or 500 items and clicking a Chaos Orb 500 times.
Oh, we can go to the next one then. All right, skip Rise. Noogie.
Get me.
Well, so you've designed 40 leagues or so far, a little bit more, I think. What are some
Very
of
good.
the learnings you're bringing forward to PoE, and can we expect, like, what can we expect?
It's honestly really hard to answer this question because there's like a million small lessons all the time.
Yeah.
But I think like the overall formula of leagues that we've had, I think it is good. And what I guess that formula is kind of things like, okay, first of all, it needs to affect the game from the start. which like like commonly it can't just be something that happens at endgame. You need to have some kind of meta progression system. You need to have something that changes up combat. You need to have some kind of storyline element. You need to have a thing that affects crafting, like so item acquisition in some manner, like that there's items you couldn't make before. Is that the whole? I feel like there's at least 2 more things on that list that I didn't mention, but like there's the list of things that we have to checkbox that a league has for it to actually be a compelling piece of content.
Yeah.
And those I guess were sort of developed over the years, to understand how to do a league. So that's obviously really important. But I mean, there's just a million tiny learnings, and I'm sure you could rattle off a few random things.
The fact is that a lot of it we're not thinking about. We're just like, oh yeah, we've known from past experiences it doesn't work, so we don't even bring up the possibility of that mechanic or something like that.
Right. And sometimes there are things we will forget from time to time that we learn again. Like I think I mentioned already, the one where we making sure that you always have to earn difficulty. Like like you can't give the player difficulty for free, because it leads to issues. Like we had...
Do you know? I think the biggest lesson that they keep forgetting. Like I think this is the single most. There's a few lessons they keep forgetting. First, DD. They keep putting bad DDs on too many monsters. But the biggest lesson they keep forgetting is fuck, my brain just stopped working. I just 404'd. What was it? My brain just stopped working. No wonder they forget. DD. No. Did a time traveler just remove it from my memory? Was I about to say something important and I don't remember? I have to remember it now or I'm going to be annoyed. Monsters attacking at the same time. Like Devourers coming out of boxes. And like all the heist members attacking at the same time. I feel like so many patches have that. So many patches have that where like monsters will synchronize their attacks. I feel like that's like the number one thing, the number one mistake that they keep doing. That's like a mistake I really, really want them to like stop doing repeatedly. It's like very often, I feel like that happens very often. I would say. It's annoying that monsters have 0 reaction time. Yeah.
Had to learn painfully again in the current league. So things like that are like lessons that like are less obvious, but like we kind of get there. But yeah, like sometimes it's easy to forget some of those lessons with so many expansions. It's like, oh crap, we made this mistake that we made in the past, and like we somehow managed to noob into it again. Like that kind of stuff will happen from time to time, of course. But ideally we've learned our lessons from what we've done.
Have you considered at all diverging from the script and maybe going for something completely different with a league? So, I mean, for instance, maybe have something that's not as connected. Because a lot of people have been asking.
Oh my god, I love this question.
A completely separate thing to mapping, for instance, where it.
Oh my god, I've bitched about that in like 30, 40 videos. The number one thing I want, and that I've been hoping for, is like Delve, but with no sulfite. Like, oh, I'm not gonna map this league. I'm gonna go to the Beyond World, or I'm gonna go to the. Oh, I'm so happy he's asking that.
Like where it literally goes a different.
Toda? No, Toda was connected to maps. You needed silver coins. I want something that's completely standalone. Heist, Toda, etc., without any of the mapping component. Literally, completely.
Way.
Right. I mean, we've done that occasionally. Like, I mean, I guess you'd say Delve was kind of one of those.
No.
Yes.
No.
I mean, we do occasionally, but
No,
I
you
will
don't.
say that it
You've
is
never
a
done
lot
it.
harder to make that kind of content.
It
You
is
have to do
hard.
completely from scratch without any kind of base to work from. So that just makes it a little bit harder. But I mean, like we like to try and do different things all the time. Ideally. So yeah, there are.
This is a non-reply.
Hopefully. It's funny.
I'm gonna
I think
ask you.
actually that PoE 2's development has actually reduced the amount of that we've been able to do in PoE 1 because, like, the environment team is very much busy, and so like during
reason.
PoE2's development, we've had
It has to be in the leveling game, so it can't be completely separate. It can! It doesn't have to be in the leveling game. It doesn't have to be. Things don't have to be the way they've been before. You can do new things. It kind of does. It kind of doesn't. You can have a mechanic that's separate while leveling and in the endgame too. I'm gonna ask more about it.
had less of that stuff, honestly, than what we have had in the past. So once we're no longer kind of doing that, I think it will be easier to have more of those kind of larger, like
Cool.
do a league that has a whole environment thing going on, and like that will be easier to do at that point.
Yeah, the stuff that we have done for like new environments and stuff for the PoE1 leagues has been very clever use of PoE1
In some
PoE2.
in some cases, it's funny because actually, like PoE2 has been in development for so long now that we have assets that are old in PoE2 that we're replacing, and then we can use those assets in PoE1.
Like hand-me-down clothing.
yeah, like it's kind of sad. It's like, oh yeah, this is too old for PoE2 now. We need to we can use them in PoE1. It's kind of, oh my goodness, yeah. It's like, I feel like we're getting to Duke Nukem Forever territory at this point. It's been a long road for sure. Yeah.
Are you still planning on having like the 3 to 4 month league cycle? And has that proven to be practical? I noticed we've gone to 4 months a lot lately.
Yeah, I feel sad about that because really we still want it to be 3 months, but just once again, it's just been it's like getting PoE2 across the line has just meant that some 4 month ones have kind of snuck in there, and I expect and have no reason to not believe that once we get PoE2 out, that both PoE1 and 2 will both have 3 month expansions going forward from that point onwards.
Dude, like, because of the 4 month cycles, I've been doing a lot more variety. Like, I thought I was just like, enjoying PoE a little bit less. Because I've been doing like 800 or 900 hours a league instead of 1200, and obviously like there will be like, once you've played that much, there will be like some degree of burnout towards the end of the league, right? Like it's easier the less you've done something. But I just checked my Tarkov playtime yesterday. It was 2,400 hours. It's not bad for a game I play off stream.
3 months is the optimal amount of time.
Well,
we
do I?
have discovered. Like any shorter and it feels like too much, any longer and it's and we're leaving, like, for lack of a better, well, it is really money, I suppose, at the end of the day, leaving money on the table, because like having more expansions in here directly translates to to more players and more money, right? Like
Sure.
at the end of the day, that's what it's about, right? So like, if you really get down to it, then
Money.
sure, yeah, like 3 months is the optimal amount of time we've found for doing that stuff.
For money.
And you're planning an
I like
alternative
how
that-
he was so matter of fact about it. I like how he was so I wish more people were matter of fact about it. Like, I mean, he's like clearly passionate and stuff like that, but he's also like not afraid to say that it is a lot of it comes down to money. Very honest. Yeah, I like that. I really appreciate that. That actually means a lot to me. I try to be really honest about it too. It's like so many people will be like, oh, I just want to change the world and I have an undying passion for gaming. It's like, yeah, that's nice. I want money. I get that. Money is necessary. I know. I like honesty. Big fan of honesty.
the league cycles between the two games?
Well, as we said, we're going to do a 3 month cycle for both.
Yep.
So like it's 1 month between a PoE 1 to PoE 2, and then 2 months from PoE 2 to PoE 1.
Gotcha.
We don't necessarily expect
makes
everyone
sense.
to play both games. I mean, there will be people who have an appetite for a lot, and those people will be able to play both. But I think there will certainly be people for whom they just play one or the other, and that's fine too. And we want to make sure that if you're one of those players, like, we wouldn't want it so that so what you were suggesting there maybe was that it's like 3 months, like, so that would
No, I meant
if
like
it was
1
if it
or
was
2
3
months.
for each one, then that would mean that
Staggered.
you'd have 6 months between a PoE 2.
That being said, we have no idea if we're ever going to be able to do gauntlets once PoE 1 and 2 are out. I have no idea how that'll work. Like, literally, PoE gauntlet might be a PoE 1 thing. There might just not be time anymore to do gauntlets. I have no idea. Well, we are doing a gauntlet this patch. It'll be hard at least. There'll be overlap if we do it.
a league in the next, and that would be too
Yeah.
long for people who just play that one game. So we do have to actually have both.
Yeah, no, I figured they'd just be slotted in between each other in terms
Yeah,
of their
put it in
release
between each
cycle.
other so that we don't, so they don't overlap.
Yeah, great. So changing topics a little bit, a super interesting thing I learned about at ExileCon from chatting with some devs, which I don't know has been talked about that much, but is pushiness in Path of Exile 2's combat, this concept.
Right.
So the idea that different characters, enemies, and skills have different weights, and
Yes,
they can
yes.
allow them to push entities out of the way, or even like push them into walls and stuff like that was being
Yeah,
discussed.
So pushy.
So-
How that affects
Go on.
content and any updates on that?
I guess there's not really much changed about it, but ultimately, yeah. Like, in case people don't know about it, in PoE 2 we made it so that everything, every monster has a pushiness value, which is the degree to which they can push other things apart, and things that have lower pushiness get pushed by things that have higher. And there's like various ranges and things around that, and all
What a
skills also
pushy.
have this, and in fact all movements have this as well, attacks and so on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interacted with some other things, like, for example, knockback now has more of a sort of compounding thing, while lots of little pellets that have a little bit of knockback will combine into a big one that can hit a
Right.
monster. And if that's a big monster, it'll be knocked back less, but that monster can then push other smaller monsters that's affected by its push.
Oh my god. Literally, I hope I can make a PoE 2 intro that's like me being pushed by monsters. And then I look into the camera and I say, this build is no pushover. I'm already thinking about the cringe. Oh my god, dude. Gonna be amazing. Shut up. Sorry, Mr. Editor. Sorry, you're gonna have to edit that one day. Thanks, Stolen. I don't mind if people steal my ideas. I'll just do them better. I'll just do them better.
Pushiness after
Yeah,
it's
there's
been
all
knocked
sorts of
back,
stuff going
so-
on here. Like, and I think that there's a few different levels of it as well. Like, you can, normal pushing, will, like, there are different levels of, like, okay, so sometimes when you push something, it can be pushed into other things, but won't continue to push those things further. And then in other cases, you can pack whole groups of monsters right up against a wall so they don't. But we're trying to avoid all cases of intersection. Like, we never, like, in PoE 1, intersection happens a lot more, and I really hate that stuff because it means that
Okay.
it makes the world not feel solid, and things can go through each other. And so in PoE 2, part of the reason the system exists is because I was determined that we will not have
Thank
a
you,
game
Taco.
where things penetrate each other as a matter of course. I mean, there are still some cases where that can happen, but in general, things don't intersect. They push each other out of the way, and like everything feels consistent. And so yeah, that makes it feel.
Do you know, personally, I am a big fan of phasing. I actually am. Like, I'm running right through monsters right now, and it feels good. It feels good. I do want to run straight through monsters. That's actually one of the most jarring things at ExileCon, was being bunched in by monsters and getting shredded. Oh, nice though. Creep block is a shit mechanic. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I don't think I've ever enjoyed, like, I think there are good and bad ways to die in a game. I think being boxed in by monsters is one of the worst feeling deaths I've ever had in any game. So I'm a big proponent of phasing. I think phasing is a good thing. I think being boxed in and killed is awful. It just feels stupid, in my opinion. Maybe it's strong enough to just run through and push the monsters away. Maybe. I like body blocking in Dota. That's true. I like it in Dota. That's the only thing I can think of where I like it. Yeah, it adds a lot in Dota. That's true. Interesting.
So
Feel a lot better.
this whole conversation that I had at ExileCon came up because I was talking about one of the big issues I felt with the demos was body blocking and the lack of ability to be able to maneuver around that. And I assume phasing is probably gone in PoE 2, right? Like, I don't imagine that's a big thing. So then the idea is that will, like, the player be able to effectively walk through very small, low pushiness value mobs, or maybe use abilities to move them out of the way to be able to do that?
If the monster is small, then so most player abilities that have movement in them increase your pushiness value a bit, and that is so that yes, you can push small mobs aside as you're doing those kinds of abilities. and that can vary based on the skill. Rory probably has more like
Yeah,
like
I mean,
specifics.
a lot of different builds have different tools in their toolkit to escape those surrounded situations by either getting bonus pushiness, but
Okay.
many of them have a situation where like 3 really large monsters surrounding you are just going to block you in, and you have to
Right.
find a clever way to.
You
not
do
die.
have to actually be able, like, you do have to think about, like, are there too many monsters here for me to be able to handle? Like, that should be a thing, and the blocking is
goal,
part
right?
of that. Like, I don't know if the hyena fight.
Yeah,
the demo-
that was a good example.
Yes, but the thing is, that one was intentional. Like, I wanted people when they played that to be like, "Oh, Jesus!" Like when the hyenas come, like I was like, I want the reaction to be like, "That's way too many hyenas." So that's kind of like a fun element of that. But one thing that you might not have been aware
Okay.
of in that fight is you technically can control the number of hyenas because they build up slowly over time, and there's a way to make them come early so that they don't overwhelm you. And there's like there's actually mechanics around that a little bit in that fight as a thing, by the way.
And it's also like that specific character that was playing in that fight had like one tool that they could maybe get out of the situation
Yeah.
with.
That was
Yeah,
the
was-
issue.
that's true. That's true. That's true.
Characters would have
That's
different
true.
options, and
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
if you were playing the Huntress, you might have picked a different skill that would
That's-
get you
that-
out in a more convenient way.
Yeah. But I agree. There needs to be tools to be able to deal with those kinds of problems. But I also want to make sure that intersection is not the solution. Like, I just don't like intersecting very much. And
Okay.
yeah, like most like any kind of game that you would consider an action game, I would say does not have things that intersect with each other. Like that's just not a thing that good actions games have. So therefore, we need to solve that problem as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is pretty interesting in terms of design space because it allows you to do something like a huntress who's a bit more like lithe and graceful, can jump over monsters, whereas someone who's like one of the brutes could effectively just toss them out of the way or push
exactly.
through them.
Right.
So
And the other thing as well is that
I mean,
players-
as long as we have good options, it just I want to feel like I have options. I don't know. Panicking also feels bad in video games. It's a tough one. It'll be interesting to see what they do about it. It'll be interesting. Also, is Madiki here? I need a prediction for a double crop. If we can do that. Well,
size, like in fact, wait, did we do the thing in the end where we reduced player size during the like the dashes, like for killing time?
No, it's more that the player is pushier than their size would normally imply.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
that's
yeah,
the dodge
So-
roll, was it?
no, the dash. So we're talking like killing palm, where you
Okay,
where you get
yep.
the cull and then
Uh-huh.
thing, right? So there's things like that. Like there's tweaks we had to do to kind of make it feel right, so that you can because you can get through spaces with a skill like that because they're pathfinding that you don't feel like you'd normally be able to get through. Like you just kind of squeeze through and it kind of looks okay. So yeah, it sort of works.
That really fits like the monk aesthetic and everything. I think one of the issues that maybe cropped up in the demos was that the dodge roll didn't seem to have any pushiness, which meant in that hyena fight people were just rolling in place, which A, looks a bit dumb, and I think B, felt really awkward. Is that something you're looking at?
I don't know.
It's a tricky one because you don't want
Yes.
dodge roll to be like just get out of most situations without
Right,
any
sure.
threat. Like,
But the
because
thing
it's
that there are
weaknesses.
two things I want to say about that though that matter, and one of them is that you melee there's you don't get hit by melee attacks while you're dodge rolling,
Right.
for at least for most of the time of it. And at XLCon we still had that stunning issue where you were getting stunned.
I'm gonna go to the toilet as well before we double cropped. I'm back. I never used this stream so much that this happens. Did I take pee breaks? No, I generally take a 3-minute break on the hour every hour, usually. Well, not on the hour. It's also like it's a great way for me. I don't like the way most streamers run ads. Like obviously this kind of sucks if it's in the YouTube video still. But I like to run ads because I like money. But I don't want people to miss anything because of ads. So I take a break and I play ads, and then because generally people that watch me want to take breaks now and again too to get a drink or pee, etc. So most people or a lot of people that watch me regularly will do that during my break. I get money, the ads aren't as intrusive. I don't know, it seems like a win-win. I'm happy with how I run ads at least. Drink, pee could be a sub goal. No, okay, let's continue. Bad Lua.
By small attacks way too much. That one changed the feel quite a bit from when you were playing, because I know that was a big issue for you for sure.
Yeah.
So that stunning thing did make quite a big difference, and so like the Exocon build in particular was too hard for that reason. It would sort of be interesting actually to get you to play again now with that change and see whether you feel the same
On
way.
game.
I'm game too.
We'll have to look into that later on. But I can. We might be able to sort that out. But it'd be interesting to see whether you
I have
feel
a
the
lot
same,
to
'cause
say,
I do agree
Bertini.
that, like it was too much there for sure. Like we need to improve that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll play,
Yeah,
sure.
There's definitely a thing of you feel like you should dodge roll in some situations where you are better standing your ground and attacking, and I
Yep.
don't know whether that's a thing like you just get the hang of
Right.
it over
But
time.
you do also need like so there's this feeling of stickiness a little bit where you stick to the
Do you
monster.
know, actually, that is a disadvantage for PoE too, because since it is a new game, but it isn't, we have certain predispositions, or like we feel a certain way going into the game. We have expectations going into the game, because if you're trying an ARPG for the next time, it's already a little tainted by Path of Exile, right? Like you will compare it to Path of Exile. If you're like if you've tried any RPG, a lot of people will be like, this is slower than I'm used to. So you already have that a little bit with other games, but you're gonna have that even more with PoE too. That's why, like, for a lot of people, the only other ARPG, which has a lot of other problems, is like Torchlight is the only other fast ARPG at the moment, which is a big complaint for a lot of people that, like, obviously a lot of people don't want to play that because it's also a mobile game. But most ARPGs are terribly slow compared to PoE. Like, a lot of people have a big expectation of speed more than before now. Half of the questions in this interview were interested as I don't like this in PoE 1. How about PoE 2? It's kind of the only thing we can do almost, because we haven't played PoE 2 that much, right? None of us have gotten to play PoE 2 more than 4 hours or something. So there's not much else you can do, to be fair.
A little bit that you need to have a little bit of, and the stickiness is caused by the stuns that you receive, where effectively, like, you know, like, because that's how you know that you went in too deep, and so there's that little just bit of feeling of, oh crap, you know, the monsters have kind of got me.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then it just feels like you just walk past them like ghosts and they don't matter.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's funny because in like Baldur's Gate 3, for, you know, the D&D system, they've got the whole attack of opportunity thing
Yeah.
that they use to solve that
I've
problem.
played that.
You need some way to make it so, like, in order to make it so that there's a feeling of kind of the front line of combat and kind of where you have some kind of element of, like, not feeling like there's a bit of danger when you get close to the monsters. You need some kind of way to make it so that the
It's super important, and like I agree with that, and that's why I was like really excited to hear about the pushiness system, because it seems like a big solution to a lot of the issues,
does
right?
need it.
And actually
you need
enhances
skills
stuff.
to do that.
Yeah, like it creates the front line when you're like effectively pushing the monsters back a bit and pushing them aside and maneuvering them. Yeah, it's very exciting. All right, so we're kind of in a bit more of a free-for-all section. If Noogie or Rise, you want to jump in with some final questions you might have. I also have some more community questions to round us out as well. Did you guys have anything you want to bring up first, though?
Well, to follow on this little note here, stun and pushiness. So, like, pushiness is just, you know, the monsters and blocking you in and all that, right? Like, does it have any relation to actual stun, and how do you solve that? Because
No, it doesn't. So you can push
Okay.
monsters aside and they don't get stunned.
Ah.
And while so
Right.
actually the other thing, so while you are being moved, you cannot pathfind, but you can initiate actions.
Okay.
okay,
That
Yeah, which means that you could do a spinning attack that sends you forward on the monk, and while you're being pushed, you won't start moving. But as soon as that push ends, you'll continue on with the
okay.
movement and
That's fine.
whirl after
But
that
also-
situation.
So
Right.
for monsters, what it means is that like the monsters aren't stunned; they're still attacking you as they're being pushed forward, unless you stun them, of course, with the attack you're doing. But they can't move into range of something else. But because when you're pushing them, you are in range of them. Usually, they can attack you during that time. So that's kind of how that is.
Okay.
and do you like how stun currently works? Because if you're given tools to get out of the way or to roll out, it's stun is one of those things in PoE that can be the most frustrating to
Yeah.
deal with, right? To the point where you have to become immune.
Well, I would hope.
Well, honestly, I would like to see more mechanics like Brian King. I think that's like Because sorry, I don't think getting stunned is the problem. At least not for me. Chain stun is the problem. Like, I don't like being stun locked. I think being stunned and stun locked are two so extremely different things. So I would like to see that, I think. Like, more things where, like, you cannot be stunned more than once every second.
That you don't feel like you have to become immune, but it is something you need to be considering for sure as a player, right? Like, it is like that
Because
will...
especially with like cooldowns, if you ever get stunned, it sets it on cooldown, but you never actually got to cast it.
Oh, you know, actually...
Ah?
Well, hang on, no. So mana costs are changing in this regard.
Yeah, mana costs are changing, so they're over time. So if you get stunned,
Yes, if you get stunned, you don't pay the full mana cost. You only pay the part
Right.
damage. But then for cooldowns,
Wow.
I mean, we did for like the power charge spending skills. We made it. They don't
a
spend
big
the
one.
charge until the moment
yes, we
the
did.
skill.
And there's
starts
other,
to
Okay.
flow.
there's other stuff.
That's cool.
Like there might be more around cooldowns we can think about.
We don't have a lot of cooldown skills that we're
Yes,
made
you're
at the
right.
moment,
You are
so
right.
Probably
There-
not.
there's not a lot of cooldown skills,
Okay.
but like maybe we could consider moving the cooldown take until after a certain critical point in the animation or something like that. Like,
Smart.
things like that we can potentially consider.
Oh, that'd be
One of the
nice.
skills we had, there was a long cooldown skill. We just made you stun immune for that brief period before it goes off. But with all of these things, we look at the skill for like what the skill should do to avoid that situation.
But I appreciate that. And the mana cost thing was actually done specifically for that issue because, yes, you can spend a huge amount of mana and then
That's good.
fail. And that sort of sucked.
Yeah.
So, like, we appreciate
suck.
that issue as an issue. But at the same
Right,
time,
okay.
we don't want to be solving this problem by, like, reducing the importance
Oops,
of
I forgot
stunning.
the bus.
Like, stunning should be important. That's an important
Right.
considerate.
I mean,
Sure.
yeah, in
I agree with
PvP2,
that.
stun is far less chance-based, far more like size of the hit against you based. So
Right.
small hits are only if they're like completely surrounded do the small hits even really have a chance of stunning you at all.
Right.
So there's a lot of
Except for when we had that bug at ExileCon. Yeah.
Don't worry about that. Rise, did you have a question
Have you
about...
maybe?
No, go ahead.
Oh, just another follow up on the stun.
Yeah.
Have you maybe considered a system in which you have a way to respond? So, for instance, I think a lot of Path of Exile 2's design, in terms of gameplay, works similarly, ideologically at least, to Diablo 2, where you have tools to deal with something in a certain fight, and you're clicking the correct button to deal with that in that immediate moment. So if you need to get away, you can get away. If you need to do damage, you do damage. If you need to debuff, you debuff. Those tools are always available. But when it comes to stuns, it's really never a system that feels rewarding, because currently in Path of Exile 1, if you just get stunned, you're just dead. You can't move, you die. That's how the game works.
That
But have
does
you thought about a
partly-
system in which in PoE 2 you can just, for instance, you get knocked down and then
Like a trinket.
you press a button to recover from that, allowing player to
Like a World of
have
Warcraft
any
trinket.
sort of response to what's happening in that way, other than just standing still and losing control of your character, which really never feels satisfying.
I mean, at least
Picture.
at the moment, the stun duration is short enough that it's shorter than most people's reaction times. So reacting to a
Okay.
stun is almost impossible.
Right. But also the I had a thing in mind and then it fell out of my head. So
I mean, we have the thing of also
Sorry, I
every
took
time
too
you
long.
get stunned, you get a higher threshold for the next stun, so it
Yes.
takes longer for the next stun to
Yeah,
occur
that's
on
cool.
you, and so on.
that,
Right.
that is
So
true. And
There's
yeah.
stuff there, but yeah, you can still have that situation of that 300 milliseconds is all it takes for you to.
Oh yeah, that's
be
right. I remember what I was going to
put in
say now.
place
So the time to kill stuff does matter for this because, like,
Yeah.
by extending that a little bit, it means that the
Yeah.
stun is going to be less of an issue there. So, like that, I think that that can also be a help to that. Yeah.
Yeah, we do expect, especially like a strength character, has more investment in increasing their stun threshold. It's just nature of how you build your character. You'll often just want more stun threshold to make it
Yo,
less
CRI, thank you for the 98-month resub, dude. Thanks so much. Sorry, just recording a video, but thank you.
likely to be a threat of
Right.
like medium-sized hits stunning you, that sort of stuff.
All right. We're going to blast through a few remaining questions. Rise or Nugi, if you have anything you want to jump in for, go ahead, though. Someone in chat kind of brought up an interesting idea that the crafting system currency changes, like the Chaos Orb especially. That seems like it would have an impact on maps and map rolling.
Probably
True.
will.
Something that's been
Probably will,
discussed.
yes. I agree. I don't know if there's much to say about that, but yes,
Yeah.
it'll have an impact on it.
Alright. That'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how you explore that.
I'm
Do you have
terrified
a-
of mapping now. I had not thought about how big it's gonna impact mapping. Because we don't have we don't have alterations and chaos in the same way. And you can't scour, so that sounds awful. Yeah, that sounds awful. Yeah. Chaos Orb is an annulment Exalted Orb now. Am I just running Chaos skills? It's always gonna feel like walling maps? Yeah. I mean, I'll adapt and adjust and overcome, but that doesn't sound good. But we'll see. Maybe it will be good. You don't know until you try, chat. I'm just gotta be... maybe we'll just value Reflect Immune more.
Reveal roadmap for what's coming up in the future?
Not one that's public, but we
Yeah.
will be talking a lot about PoE 2 during this year. I mean, obviously it's the launch year. There'll be a huge amount of stuff going on. You know, yeah. There's
The
quite a bit-
launch
there's
year?
quite a bit to talk about still. So yeah.
Are they only having a 4-month
You should
beta?
expect them to come relatively quickly.
Are we
from this
launching
point
at Christmas? That's what I would do if they can.
Rise, did you have a question you want to jump in, mate? Or Noogie, go
I have an artsy question.
Ooh.
We
I have
understand that
just to follow up
most-
on that.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so just to
Yeah, go.
follow up on that, do you have any? So you don't need to spot, but I'm more thinking about ambition. So in PoE 1, I remember how you were talking about Act 10. We're gonna keep going for 10 years. What are your current thoughts of PoE's
aspirations.
future?
I see no reason it wouldn't last as long as PoE 1 has until now, at least, right? Like, why not?
Another 10 years, let's go.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Why not?
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
Of course, like we're a long-term game.
Nice.
Kind of the thing, right?
Rise?
All right, I'm asking the artsy question
Do it.
now. This one's gonna be tough. We understand that most microtransactions from PoE 1 will be transferable to PoE 2. You guys have talked about that quite a lot. A lot of people's concerns is how this impacts the game's immersion and aesthetic, particularly in towns and in the general interaction with other players. How do you think these elements from the first game will blend with the new world and atmosphere of PoE 2 without disrupting its unique feel and design?
Do you know another problem is obviously like it can be good for content creators. It can be good for content creators to ask questions on behalf of the community as well. But a big problem with that, and this is why I appreciate that they're having so many different people ask questions. A big problem with that is you cannot ask a substantial follow-up for somebody else's question. Like that didn't sound like a Rise QT question, right? Like that isn't something he cares about, I believe. And you can't ask a follow-up then. Because you don't know if the answer is satisfactory or not. Like that sounded like a Scrya question to me. Like I was like, Scrya would ask that question. Whereas I'm gonna focus on things that are important to me for sure. Because then I can ask follow-ups.
Well, it's kind of just unfortunately the case that it will affect it, right? Like, I mean, there's not a lot we can do about that. I think that the decision to make the monetization the same across both games was much more of an important and like player positive thing to do
Yeah,
than
sure.
the downside of that.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you know, like microtransactions being what we sell, like, you know, like people wanting shiny, flashy things, like that's going to be how it is. And I think that over time, like obviously we've got older stuff that doesn't look as good, but people tend to wear newer stuff anyway. So I don't think it'll be like, I don't think like old stuff looking bad will be that common occurrence for the most part. But yeah, obviously it can happen. I actually, a couple of days ago, was looking at some PoE 1 microtransactions, what they look like in PoE 2. It's kind of interesting. And it's like, you know, you look at them and you're kind of like, okay, well, yeah, like this thing on the screen looks worse than the other stuff on the screen for sure, right? But I mean, it is what it is. Like, it's
I mean, it still
that's what it looks like. What looked like when you bought it.
Yeah.
You know, like that's kind of the
You know, I was kind of sad in the other interview that they said that the die system wasn't like a big priority anymore, because that's on the first Exile column they talked about and showed off. They had a big showcase about it, where they talked about how they were going to let you dye different parts of an armor and stuff like that. And I don't care that much about the cosmetics of the game, but that is one of the things I do care about, because so many things, like I love mix and matching things. I'm a huge fan of mix and matching things. because sometimes I just want to, I don't know, dude. I don't know if it's like I want to be special, but sometimes I don't want things to go with the one they were designed with. Sometimes I'm like, oh, you know what? These look really, really cool together. But sometimes something will be fucking silver white and the other thing will be like a tainted white gold or like a tinted white gold, sorry. And just won't look good together. Whereas if I could literally just change the shade a little bit, it would look really, really good. So I was really excited for the dye system because I do like playing around with the cosmetic system a bit. So that's a little sad to me.
The kind of the reality of that.
It's still got like nicer lighting and stuff on
I mean,
it, but you can only do so
well,
much.
I mean, it's sort of interesting though because there's nicer lighting in the area, but it's still in like it depends on what era it's from. Because if it's from before the PBR, this is physically based rendering era, then some of the stuff the lighting can look a bit funky on. Like, I mean, it still works, but it's like it certainly doesn't look as nice as what new stuff looks like. But for anything that's like, what was it about 5 years ago, maybe when we started PBR, or maybe 4? Like, I can't remember, but anything post that era looks a lot nicer in the lighting of PoE2 for sure, just because it's using the new lighting stuff that we did. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, we've got some micros that we sold in 2012. It's like 2011 even, I guess. But those things don't look as good as modern stuff for sure.
Garena Pet and Razor Footprints.
Excuse me, I want the Razor Footprints. I regret missing out.
Yeah, for sure. But
I hated the Razor Footprints.
The other day, there was the most ridiculous thing. Someone used that Garena Pet as a stand-in for one of the skills on the Bog Witch. Like, it was a skill that had fire, like it was like a fire trail line, and like this Garena Pet just went screaming across the screen with like fire coming out of its ass. Like, and I saw it, and I was just like, what the hell was that? Like, I haven't seen this thing in like 10 years. Like, it was just like, actually, it was the most ridiculous moment. Yeah, I was like,
Perfect.
Yeah. I think I've got a screenshot of it somewhere. I'll see if I can dig it up. It was like the most absurd thing I've ever seen. Yeah.
Like that's one of the good elements of PoE 1 that benefits PoE 2.
Yeah.
Where possible, will stash tabs also carry over for PoE 2?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I imagine some of them might not, like if the thing doesn't exist in PoE 2.
I mean, I don't know if there's anything that like there's a stash tab. I mean, they might have to change a bit, but like I don't think there's anything as a stash tab for that's going to be like straight up removed.
Well, you were undecided on divination cards last I heard, right?
Well, oh sure, okay, yeah, there's that, I guess. Yeah, but I mean, like, sure, like there might be a few things like that, and
essences maybe. I could see them.
Well,
not being
I mean,
PoE2.
I'm sure we will have those eventually.
Okay.
So it might be that the stash tab is not there when you first come in, but then when they get added, then they come in.
Oh, that's
that
cool.
kind of thing could happen. But
I got to applaud that carrying over. That's awesome. So will PoE 2 move away from the current wealth of splinters, fragments, and
Nah, they're not going to do item loot pets. They've said for sure.
shards, or do you see that as a non-issue?
I guess I don't see that as a well. I mean, ultimately, there are two things, right? One of them is we want to have a variety of in-game content to do, and two, we prefer it when those things are tradable. Like, because the alternative to that is like some counter on your character that you can't trade, I guess.
Yeah,
Like, you need to have some form of item that's going to give you grant you access to the end game stuff. If we want to have a variety of in-game things, then that means you're going to have a variety of various like keys to enter those things that you can build up to. So it's just kind of how it is, I guess.
Oh my god. Will we see more of rollable things like imitations? What are they called? The memories? Like, in-game memories.
Those things build up, yeah, but yeah, as I said, kind of how it is.
It
Alright,
is
do
what
you,
it is.
Razanugi, you have any final questions come to mind?
I just have a follow-up, I guess,
Yeah.
because we never got an answer on the. We talked about the pickup radius, but what about the singular button to pick something up from the ground that the console has? Is that ever going to be a possibility? You just press
like,
F
pick
and
up
it
all
picks
or
up the thing
something?
that's
I don't know
underneath
if
you.
that's even. I don't. It doesn't feel. I don't have an answer to that really. I have to sort of look into that and think about that one. I don't really have a.
Well, even the one they have in D4, you just use a different button than the mouse button to pick something up. You just
That'd be nice.
allocate it to a different button and you use that.
I'll-
It's actually
I'll-
I was surprised how good that felt sometimes.
I'll look into it. I'll look into it. All right.
On keybinds, so you're gonna have like a lot of weapon swapping, WSD. How are you gonna manage all those keys that players will eventually have to bind and press?
I just it's hasn't really been a huge issue for us. Just when playing, honestly, like it's kind of just been fine.
I mean, you don't usually have.
It is
more
an issue
than
right now.
5 like active using all the time skills. Really,
You got stuff you use more rarely. That you
Yeah, you've got more skill. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them are spirit reservations, taking up your gem slots and things like that. Later on, you might put some on a meta gem to trigger rather than doing.
Right. So
Any
you kind of
of
end
that
up with
sort
it
of
being. It doesn't sort of feel that like it's that wrong as far as like number of things goes. And when if you're using WASD, so that you've kind of got that your hand there, then you've kind of got the left click also that's not move only anymore. To
White
be
sock
using
Hispanic
other
key.
skills, so that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That hasn't kind of ended up being an issue in practice, I think.
Fantastic. Can we expect to see you guys somewhere else soon, or is there some upcoming reveals that people can look forward to?
So we'll have another reveal not too far away. I'm not going to give you the exact date yet. And we also are just doing more like community podcasts and things like that.
Right.
So we'll be doing one of those every few weeks or so. It's been a little while since I posted on Reddit because I've been a little bit busy, but I do plan to continue posting on there and doing more stuff. So
I'd say no, that's awesome.
Got to talkative try some more content to make a video about, I guess.
This has been an amazing Q&A. Thank
funny.
you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate
But
it.
yeah, so I just want to make sure that we're engaging with the community as much as we can. That's the idea.
It feels like back in the beta days of PoE 1.
Well, it should do.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, what did we do back then that made us successful? I'm thinking like, okay,
Yeah.
let's make sure we're doing all that stuff again. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I don't want to leave anything off the table there.
Amazing. Thank you both very much, and thank you everyone for watching and for your questions.
Yeah,
See you fine
thank
folks
you.
later. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Very nice. Very nice. That was very good. I think Ziggy did a really good job of moderating. I think enough podcasts don't have a good moderator. I don't think podcasts have a good enough moderator a lot of the time. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. That was very, very good. Good job, team. I don't know. Something I want to try to do a lot for when I do a podcast, I want to have follow-ups. I want to have really good follow-ups. That's what I want to really drill down. I really liked what Sai said. Sai said I should try to predict what they're going to answer and prepare a follow-up. I think that's the best advice anyone's given me. I think I'm going to do that. I feels like Noogie has issues to formulate his questions correctly at times. Yeah. Noogie waffles a lot. It's funny. It's very Noogie though. But he has great questions. But they get sometimes very long. But yeah. No, that was really good. I'm doing an interview the 30th, I think. I don't know. I'll announce it on Twitter when I can remember. But yeah, really good podcast. That was a longer react than I thought, but I felt like I had a lot to say. I mean, if you just want to watch the podcast, you just watch the podcast on its own, right? So hopefully you enjoyed what I had to say about it and my random takes. So either way, thanks for watching. Sub if you liked the video, and try to die more than I do. Wait, less than I do? Are you guys? I can't remember anymore. Are you guys supposed to die more or less?